Let me ask you this. Imagine watching your one true love ripped away right before your eyes. She screams for salvation, but you are helpless to answer. Fear paralyzed your limbs. You possess neither the strength to fight nor the courage to move. Even the great mage declared it futile. In this cruel world, power is the only absolute truth, a truth even he could not fully comprehend. And so, she was dragged into the abyss, proving that the law of power stands above all existence. That day etched a scar upon Aruto's soul that would never fade. For 60 agonizing years, he dedicated every breath to the relentless pursuit of strength. He exhausted every forbidden technique. He sought the legendary treasure within the world's deadliest dungeon. But in the end, death claimed him before he could grasp it. A lifetime spent chasing a shadow. Yet, upon his demise, he found himself standing before the Almighty. Possessing the tear of God, he earned an audience in the afterlife. The Creator offered a cruel now choice: eternal slumber for his weary soul, or 20 years of reliving the hell of mortal life. But his flame had not yet extinguished. To save his life and rescue his beloved, he chose to walk the path of thorns once more. And thus, our hero seized his legendary second chance. Time rewound to his very beginning. He gazed upon his parents once more, his mother, radiant with flowing hair, and his father, alive and standing tall. He swore not to squander a single heartbeat. He tried to begin his evolution immediately, but his infant body refused to obey. However, he possessed a weapon unknown in his past life. A translucent system window flickered into existence, visible only to his eyes. Barely a month old, the infant tried to command the world, convinced he was speaking clearly. He recalled the divine revelation. God explained that every soul enters the world blessed with a unique gift, the gift of unbalanced wisdom, the gift of broken martial arts, the gift of cataclysmic magic, or even the gift of infinite charisma, perhaps the gift of inventive genius, or the final, most mysterious option, the gift of creation. In his previous timeline, Aruto wielded the gift of wisdom. The deity asked if he desired to reclaim his old power, but this time, he forged a new path. "I choose the gift of creation," he declared. His past wisdom knew of the 5 common blessings, yet creation was a myth he had never encountered. That was the power he needed to defy fate. The first anomaly was the status screen, a phenomenon unknown in this era. It was undoubtedly the manifestation of his new divine gift. Beyond rescuing his lover, a primal duty burned within him. He had to save his parents, who were destined to perish when he turned 8. The memories were ancient, buried under decades of pain. But he could never forget the night of his 8th birthday. A goblin raid shattered their village. The agony of watching his father sacrifice his flesh and blood so his family could flee, it still haunted him. When hope ran out, his mother used her last ounce of strength to throw him to safety. She begged him to survive, even if he had to do it alone. Helpless, he fled into the darkness. And as we all know, goblins are vile, lustful beasts. You can imagine the nightmare that befell his mother after he escaped. But enough of this tragic history. In this life, he would rewrite the script with blood and steel. Step 1. Absolute mental domination. He poured everything into his intelligence and mental power stats. He studied with such ferocity that even his mother feared for his health. Secretly, he began cultivating his mana, teasing his father with his precocious talents. While other toddlers ate dirt, Aruto was mastering parkour as the neighborhood evasion skills skyrocketed. He continued this relentless grind, unlocking ability after ability. 8 years flew by in the blink of an eye. Aruto sat beneath an ancient tree, sharpening his innate gift. His power was no longer that of a child. It was a weapon ready to be drawn. His mother returned, beaming with pride on his 8th birthday, overflowing with love. She crushed him in an embrace so tight he feared his ribs might snap. His father laughed, claiming the boy inherited his dashing good looks. He announced that Aruto's warrior training would begin now, a plan his mother happily endorsed. His mother smiled warmly, offering her congratulations once more. She reminded him of the evening ritual at the church. It was the law every child turning 8 must receive the bracelet of identity. These artifacts proved one's existence in the kingdom. The moment had finally arrived for Aruto to claim his mark. Inside the holy sanctuary, the priest commanded, "Stretch forth your hands, child." Aruto obeyed. The priest fastened the magical band onto his wrist, sealing his identity. "This will aid you in the capital," the holy man advised wisely. "Guard it with your life." As the metal cooled against his skin, Aruto's mind darkened. In mere hours, the goblin horde would descend upon this peaceful haven. Tears threatened to be iron, too. The hour of judgment was here. Remembering the weakness of his past self, Aruto swore a blood oath to save this village. He marched into the forest and summoned his status window. It was time to assess his arsenal. He calculated that he needed to hit level 15 to unleash his true physical potential. But his magic, it sat at a staggering level 32. The culmination of 8 years of hellish discipline was ready to explode. The only remaining in his status peculiar crafting skill, the ability to forge functional objects from nothing. A realization struck him like lightning. He had never wielded this power in his past life simply because the system had never granted it to him before. Concluding that an extra trump card wouldn't hurt in the heat of battle, Aruto activated instantly. The goblin menace was already swarming the forest. Sensing their bloodlust, he dove behind a massive tree. 3 goblins, unmistakably the vanguard scouts, prowled into the clearing. "Stay calm," Aruto commanded his racing heart. In his previous timeline, he had slaughtered legions of monsters, but as he peeked out, the creatures locked eyes with him and shrieked, charging with reckless fury. This was it, the inaugural battle of his second life. The moment had come to unleash the results of his hellish training. Mana began to coil around him as Aruto channeled his focus, swearing on his very soul that he would not leave a single regret in this timeline. He was the village's last line of defense. With a roar, Aruto unleashed a blazing torrent of fire magic directly at the monster. The thrill of victory surged through Aruto's veins. To engage the second target, a shadow loomed from his blind spot. His body in a desperate dodge. One mistake in this weak body meant death. Having silenced all 3 scouts, he realized a grim truth: his attacks lacked the devastating power he needed. He offered a silent prayer of thanks that he hadn't run into a high-tier beast just yet. The second the last goblin hit the dirt, a golden holographic window flashed level up. A wave of euphoria washed over him, the undeniable proof of his growing strength. The sudden influx of stats left Aruto reeling, a sensation akin to being drunk on pure power. But the celebration was cut short. Another blade raised high, it slashed Aruto, drawing first blood. The attacker, Aruto glanced over his shoulder, and his blood ran cold. It wasn't just a patrol, an entire green tide was rising behind him. He had been careless, and now his arm was useless. Facing an army in this condition seemed like sheer madness. The familiar, suffocating weight of despair began to crush his chest. "Nothing has changed," the dark voice in his mind whispered. No matter how hard he struggled, was his destiny simply to die again? Suddenly, the image of his beloved flashed through his mind's eye. That memory sparked a wildfire in his soul. "No, I will not give up," Aruto screamed internally, rejecting his weakness. In response to his indomitable will, his magic power exploded, surging all the way to level 50 and unlocking a terrifying new ability, the Grave Reaper. As the system window announced the massive spike in power, the true nature of his crafting skill finally clicked into place. This wasn't just about making items. Its true potential was a weapon of mass destruction that scaled with his level. "So that is why I couldn't wield it before," Aruto realized, his eyes glowing with understanding. The horde amassed behind him. Sensing his injury, they saw wounded prey, unaware they were approaching a predator who had just awakened. What fate awaited him now? Without hesitation, a goblin berserker lunged for Aruto's throat. He sidestepped the rusty blade by a hair's breadth, death brushing against his skin, and retaliated with a point-blank fireball. Aruto danced through the chaotic melee, his injured hand screaming in protest, as the relentless onslaught of green skin and steel intensified with every passing second. A squad of 8 goblins rushed him at once. "I can do this," Aruto roared, putting his faith in his new stats. He slammed his hand down, activating the Grave Reaper skill and warping the monsters into a new abyss. Truly pulled it off. The grave crafting skill had literally buried his enemies alive. Staring at his trembling hands, Aruto felt a surge of hope hot enough to burn. He had saved the village. Fate could be rewritten simultaneously. The system chimed again, granting him a massive level boost for the massacre. But he remembered the old adage, great power comes with a price. The body reconstruction from leveling up was about to exact its toll. Overwhelmed by the agonizing growth pains, Aruto's vision faded to black as he collapsed. When Aruto finally opened his eyes, a chill wind was biting at his skin. Something soft fluttered near his face, and he jolted up, spotting a small creature bouncing away. What in the world? A beautiful slime paused and looked back at him, tilting its head innocently. Aruto noticed a strange liquid it offered. Instinct told him it was safe. Upon drinking it, vitality flooded back into his exhaust. The slime hopped around joyfully, demanding his attention. Just what was this mysterious little entity? Observing its playful movements, Aruto lowered his guard. This wasn't a monster, it was a friend. Without warning, the slime launched itself onto Aruto's face. He panicked for a second before realizing it meant no harm. Its gelatinous touch was just incredibly ticklish. Moments later, Aruto stood at the peak of the mountain, looking down at the breathtaking view of his hometown, a peaceful sanctuary nestled in the valley. The slime nudged him, gesturing toward the village, but Aruto shook his head slowly. I cannot go back yet. He had a woman to save and a destiny to forge, but he was still far too weak. Staying here was futile. A mile away lay the entrance to one of the legendary underground cities. His mission was clear: conquer the upper floors of the dungeon and power level until he was unstoppable. Memories of his beloved fueled his determination. He visualized the dungeon's brutal layout and the hellish battles to come. He had only 7 years until the day of destruction arrived. As the little slime crawled onto his shoulder tall, offering a silent, heartfelt apology to the parents he was leaving behind without a goodbye. He left a single letter explaining he had a mission to complete. This felt like an ending. But Aruto knew the truth. It was the beginning of his journey to fix everything. He offered a silent prayer of gratitude to his parents. Their love had been an endless ocean that nurtured his soul. 8 long years had drifted by in a haze of happiness, but as tears welled in Aruto's eyes, he knew the time for farewells had finally come. He stepped away from the sanctuary of his home, yet a gelatinous shadow trailed doggedly in his wake. Aruto hesitated. Sensing the peril that lay on the road ahead, he warned the creature to turn back, fearing it could not survive the monsters lurking in the wilds. But the slime simply cheered him on, clapping with its wobbly limbs. Moved by such unwavering loyalty, Aruto couldn't bear to leave it behind. And so, the duo ventured forth into the unknown. A month later, they finally struck. Beside him, the little slime was struggling to drag a heavy burden across the dirt. It was the spoils of war from a fresh kill. The creature deposited a gleaming magic stone directly into Aruto's inventory. With currency like this, poverty was a thing of the past. Suddenly, the slime darted away, chirping urgently as if it had made a discovery. Following its lead, Aruto wondered if it had scouted a safe haven. He peered cautiously around the jagged edge of the mountain. The slime had struck gold. A secluded cave awaited them. It was the perfect sanctuary to recharge before reaching the city of Ketagris. As meat sizzled over the open flame, Aruto mused on the weakness of the local beasts. For someone of his caliber, survival in this region was child's play. His physical form was evolving rapidly, mirroring the peak condition of his past life. A vessel of unparalleled potential was being forged. Then, the air shimmered as the system intervened. A holographic status window materialized in thin air before his eyes. Level 32 flashed in neon text. His stats were skyrocketing at an exponential rate. But the wilderness was too slow. Only a dungeon could satisfy his hunger for absolute power. Aruto strategized while devouring a skewer, perched like a king upon a rock. Even the slime, climbing onto his shoulder, was happily munching on its own portion of the feast. He offered it some rice, wondering if its appetite knew no bounds. With a smile, he realized this little glutton was an expert at harvesting magic stones. He was truly lucky to have such a companion, but when he jokingly asked if it was a predator, a sudden realization struck him cold. However, they were not alone. A gaze filled with intent pierced through the darkness from behind the ridge. Instinct took over. Aruto launched a skewer like a deadly projectile, but the target vanished in a blur. It moved before Aruto could track the entity. A counterattack slammed into him with devastating force. Cold sweat trickled down his spine. He could not withstand a combo at that velocity. Looking up, he saw a demonic silhouette looming over him. Was this a bandit seeking his magic stones? The figure descended from the sky, landing lightly directly in front of him. In a flash, his dinner was snatched away. The attacker revealed herself a beastkin girl possessing both human grace and wild animal traits. Aruto stood frozen in sheer confusion as she ravaged his food. He could only stammer, asking if she was a monster. She claimed to be Majika, a wandering traveler, and demanded his name. Aruto introduced himself, his guard slowly lowering. Her aura held no malice. In fact, she radiated a strange, friendly charm, their eyes locked in a silent exchange. He couldn't help but compliment her adorable ears. She identified as a member of the squirrel tribe, though she dismissed her own lineage with a wave of her hand. Aruto could only stare, perplexed by her nonchalant attitude toward her own heritage. Blink and you'll miss it. She teleported instantly, reappearing right beside the crackling fire where the food was cooking. She demanded the rest of the meal without a shred of politeness. Aruto was left reeling by her terrifying speed and total lack of manners. Even the slime felt the threat. Launching a futile attempt to reclaim the shish kebab from the girl's grip, dawn broke. But the uninvited guest hadn't left. Aruto woke to find the beast girl shadowing him, with his slime traitorously perched on her shoulder. When he demanded an explanation, she scoffed. She claimed he was just a child needing protection on the road to the city. Aruto retorted, questioning her own maturity. She replied with cryptic wisdom, appearances deceive, and the heart often remains young. He insisted on his independence, claiming he was an adult, but then a realization sparked within his mind. Why fight fate? He suggested they travel together to speed up the journey, and a smile sealed their temporary alliance. Moments later, the destination came into view. The majestic city of Ketagris rose from the horizon, guarded by walls that scraped the heavens. As they crossed the threshold, a greeter intercepted them. She promised low taxes and a sanctuary for all who entered the gates. For centuries, Ketagris had been a melting pot of chaos, a city where every race under the sun collided, all because of the colossal dungeon piercing the sky at its center. Like moths to a flame, adventurers flocked here, seduced by the promise of power. But as the city noise washed over them, Majika froze. Visible tremors of fear shook her small frame. She confessed that the sea of humanity was terrifying to her. Aruto tried to comfort her, mentioning his own humble beginnings in a small village. She revealed a harsh life of survival on the streets. Aruto nodded in understanding, admitting that he too had once trembled before the unknown. Majika's eyes narrowed with suspicion, pointing out the contradiction. Hadn't Aruto claimed he was a stranger to this land? Aruto didn't flinch, clarifying that he had walked these streets a decade ago with his parents, recalling how the city once pulsed with vibrant life. Yet, the city remained frozen in time. Aruto scanned his surroundings, his mind racing like a grand strategist. He wondered what fate would unleash in the next 2 years, knowing that absolute caution was his only shield. Breaking his train of thought, Majika asked where his path would lead next. Aruto declared that the Adventurers Guild was their next destination to secure funds for their survival, and coolly invited Majika to join the hunt. She accepted without hesitation. Moments later, they stood within the guild hall, where Aruto boldly announced his intent to trade magic stones. The receptionist sneered, looking down at the boy with disdain, and declared that Aruto had stumbled into the wrong establishment. "Get out," the man scoffed, insisting the guild was no playground for children. In response, Aruto upended his bag, and a literal avalanche of magic stones crashed onto the counter. The receptionist's jaw dropped in sheer disbelief, stuttering as he asked where a mere child had acquired such a treasure trove. Aruto's expression remained stone cold as he simply replied that they were the spoils of his hunt. "This woman standing beside me, whom I defeated, has no idea how to sell these goods." Aruto lied smoothly, gesturing toward Majika with supreme confidence. The man stared at Majika in shock. She opened her mouth to protest this absurdity, but Aruto cut her off instantly, commanding her silence with a sharp glance. A smirk touched Aruto's lips as he calculated the haul. The total value would amount to roughly 1,990 units. The clerk tallied the fortune: 2 gold, 29 silver, and 85 copper. Yet, as the coins clinked, Aruto felt a wave of bone-deep exhaustion wash over him. He questioned whether this fatigue was merely the curse of a young body, or the heavy price of his unnatural, rapid growth. As he swept the gold into his bag, Aruto pressed his advantage, demanding to register as an official finder. The man hesitated, asking why a child would court death as an adventurer. Aruto pointed to Majika, claiming she was his adult guardian, though he needed the license for his own grand design. Majika attempted to speak up once more, but Aruto was faster. He clamped a hand over her mouth, urging the stunned receptionist to hurry, for time was a luxury they did not possess. As they exited the guild, Majika turned to him with a curious gaze, offering herself to his cause. Aruto, confused by her phrasing, asked for clarity before quickly apologizing. He explained that in this youthful form, articulating his complex plans was a struggle, and he merely required her assistance. He then questioned if hunting for stones was a waste of time, but Majika countered that merely hoarding wealth would never elevate his status. Majika trailed behind him, but her ears perked up as Aruto scoffed at the very concept of reputation. True strength isn't built on fame, he declared coldly. Majika stared at his back, visibly shaken by the profound wisdom coming from a child. Taking the lead, Aruto announced that with their pockets now heavy with gold, securing a hotel was the priority. He offered to share a feast as a reward for her help, but gave her the freedom to walk away if their paths were meant to diverge. Majika agreed to follow, but with a tease either payment in coin or time spent in his room. Hearing this, Aruto simply commanded her to keep up. What a terrifying woman, Aruto chuckled internally, amused by her boldness. As twilight embraced the city, Aruto admitted his genuine relief that she had stayed, confessing he had fully expected her to abandon him. Seated in their private quarters, Aruto explained that his ragged appearance was a locked door to the finer things in life, including the hotel's gourmet cuisine. He was certain that a woman of her taste would appreciate the luxury he could now provide. As Aruto laid out his plans, Majika's gaze bored into him, intense and unblinking, leaving Aruto puzzled by her scrutiny. Suddenly, she broke the tension, announcing she would cleanse herself in the bath. Seeing her reach for her cloak, Aruto panicked, frantically ordering her to undress in the sanctuary of the bathroom, just as his slime companion collapsed onto the bed in exhaustion. Alone in the bath, Majika prepared to dress, marveling at the novelty of this strange, domestic intimacy. Stepping out, she resolved to sleep immediately and feast like a queen come morning light. But then she froze. Aruto was practicing magic, and the sheer density of mana radiating from him was suffocating. It was a feat impossible for a mortal watching him meditate. Majika's mind reeled. Who, or what, was this boy truly? She had traversed the ends of the earth searching for a specific soul, yet this enigma had simply walked into her life days ago. Observing him now, she saw power that eclipsed his age and mastery that defied all known techniques. She had to stay close. She had to uncover the truth. He was hiding a secret that could shake the foundations of the world. Majika replayed every word he had spoken, stunned by a maturity that betrayed his youthful shell. Could he be the chosen one she had sought? But the star prophecy was absolute. The hero would descend in the body of a maiden. Therefore, Aruto could not be the savior. And yet, as she watched his silent meditation, a powerful premonition struck her soul. Aruto was the key that would unlock a new era. As the realization hit her, Aruto collapsed into deep sleep, his energy completely spent from the monstrous training. Majika watched in silence as he crumbled, his body hitting the floor like a corpse the moment his mana ran dry. Why does he push past his limits like this? She wondered, a cold knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. It was as if an invisible predator was snapping at his heels, but then a real predator appeared on the rooftop. A shadow darkened the open window. Majika stiffened, surprised. Was a thief actually daring to invade their sanctuary? His presence was faint, weak. She could have crushed him instantly, but curiosity stayed her hand. How would Aruto handle this threat? She feigned deep slumber, her senses sharp. The intruder crept into the room, his hand reaching for the unconscious boy. But Aruto was no helpless victim. He shifted, his eyes snapping open with terrifying calm to greet the stranger. Steel flashed in the moonlight. The thief lunged with a knife, and Majika sprang from her bed, screaming a warning. The blade froze inches from Aruto's throat. "Freeze one move and you bleed," the thug hissed. He sneered, promising mercy in exchange for compliance, but neither Majika nor Aruto showed fear, only cold calculation. "You're after the money, aren't you? Who sent you?" Aruto's voice was ice cold, striking the thief dumb with his composure. Action spoke louder than words. Aruto didn't flinch. He struck, an air cannon exploded from his palm. The impact was devastating. The blast launched the intruder straight out the window. Majika rushed to Aruto's side, panic in her eyes. "I am fine," he murmured, composed as ever. But watching the enemy fall, Majika realized the terrifying truth. That wasn't simple magic. It was a lethal, complex weave executed in a split second. To reach this realm of mastery at his age, just what kind of hell had he survived? She turned to ask, but the boy was already unconscious again. Deep down, she knew this child was destined to shake the foundations of the world. Her eyes fell upon the assassin's dropped blade. Morning brought hunger. The duo descended to the tavern, the aroma of roasted meat filling the air. Aruto watched her tear into the feast. "Is it to your liking? Does it satisfy your appetite?" Majika didn't even pause to breathe, declaring it a meal fit for the gods with her mouth full. Aruto bellies full and spirits high. Majika patted her stomach, completely satisfied. Aruto smirked, teasing that she had eaten enough to feed an entire platoon of soldiers. "So, the dungeon next?" Majika asked. Aruto shook his head. The previous night's visitor had altered the game. He fingered the confiscated dagger. It was time to hunt the hunter. Aruto strode into the guild, his presence commanding attention. Eyes followed him from the shadows near the entrance. The merchant from yesterday approached. Recognizing the young prodigy, "Back so soon, young master?" "Are the appraisers in?" Aruto asked sharply. When told the guild master was available, his eyes glinted. "Perfect timing," Aruto replied. Fate was on his side. "I need a word with leadership. It seems you have a rat in your walls." The guildmaster's gaze sharpened instantly. Aruto laid out the facts. An assassin had breached their sanctuary the night before. He wasn't searching blindly. He went straight for the gold earned from the magic stone sold to this very guild. No rummaging. No hesitation. The thief knew exactly where the loot was stashed. "He went for my bag specifically," Aruto declared, his voice cutting through the noise. "Which means the culprit is someone who watched our transaction right here in this hall." Aruto turned, his gaze locking onto the staff. The guildmaster nodded slowly. The boy's logic was flawless. He turned his glare to Lion, the employee seated across from him. "You were on duty. Did you see anything suspicious?" Lion shifted uncomfortably. I wouldn't know. Maybe not." His answer was a stuttering mess. Aruto watched the man like a hawk. Lion's sweating face betrayed him, even as he denied everything. Then, Aruto played his trump card. Pointing at Majika, he lied. "My companion branded the attacker with a magical signature during the fight. If you see a man with a glowing mark on his hand, arrest him." The trap was set. Instantly, Lion flinched, instinctively pulling his sleeves down to cover his hands. Aruto slammed the dagger onto the table. "This blade is evidence for the gendarmes. It will lead us straight to the owner." "Indeed," the guildmaster agreed, reaching for the weapon. "Justice will be served." Suddenly, Lion interrupted. Panic exploded in his eyes. "Wait, by the laws of combat, the victor keeps the spoils. Surely such a fine weapon belongs to the boy." The guildmaster paused, considering the logic, but Lion was already moving, desperate to get the evidence out of the guild's hands. He thrust the dagger into Aruto's hand, boasting of its legendary sharpness and warning him to guard the artifact with his life, hinting at its priceless nature. Aruto immediately shoved Lion away, his face twisting with clear disdain at the sudden intimacy. The boss cut in, demanding a transaction smooth as silk, emphasizing the absolute necessity of tighter security for such high-stakes dealings. Lion, flashing a confident smirk, assured the boss he had everything under control, as Aruto and Majika turned to leave. Majika's voice cut through the air, accusing the man of being nothing more than a thief. She questioned the logic of letting such a scoundrel walk free. Aruto simply replied that the warnings had been delivered, his voice cold. "Whatever happens next is no longer our burden to bear." Majika narrowed her eyes, probing deeper. Was his ambition truly limited to just acquiring a weapon? Aruto shifted his gaze toward her. A flicker of surprise crossed his mind. Had she seen through the facade, he decided to let it slide. With the preparation phase over, their true odyssey was finally beginning. Standing at the precipice of the dungeon entrance, Aruto looked up, the colossal structure piercing the heavens as he began to speak. Majika followed his gaze upward, admitting in a hushed tone that the tower was so vast she couldn't even see its peak. Aruto explained that before them stood a legendary labyrinth, one of the world's supreme mysteries, its origins and architects lost to the sands of time. Stepping through the portal, the world twisted around them, instantly transporting them to a completely different realm. Aruto clarified the layout. The lower level encompassed the 1st to the 25th floors. It was a relatively safe zone, a novice adventurers to cut their teeth. But as Aruto spoke, a bone-chilling roar tore through the atmosphere, seizing his attention. Panic erupted nearby. 2 adventurers screamed that a monster from the upper floors had broken loose. They yelled that magic was useless, begging Aruto to run for his life. Suddenly, a colossal horned rat, radiating murderous intent, charged straight for Aruto. The crowd, seeing only a helpless child, screamed frantically, facing the onrushing death, and whispered a single command: grave. The earth obeyed instantly. A gaping abyss tore open beneath the creature's feet, swallowing it whole. But Aruto frowned. He had miscalculated. He had poured too much mana into the spell, risking collateral damage to the innocent bystanders. Majika stared into the depths, stunned, mirroring the shock of the crowd who couldn't comprehend how the ground had simply vanished. Whispers of an earthquake spread, but the ground was still. Aruto quickly spun a lie, claiming the floor had simply collapsed due to bad luck and structural decay. The chasm was dangerously deep. He shouted for everyone to watch their footing as the terrified crowd scattered in all directions. Majika leaned in, whispering, "Why hide that it was your power?" Aruto scoffed, replying that the truth was too unbelievable for them to accept. It was better to leave the chaos behind and ascend. Starting from the 26th floor, the difficulty would spike to intermediate, where the true nightmare of the maze began. Moments later, a massive bear loomed over Majika. Aruto watched, impressed, as she obliterated the beast with a single devastating blow. Resting beside the fallen monster, Majika brushed off his praise, noting sharply that Aruto had been holding his own just fine. Unsheathing the blade from his belt, Aruto decided it was time to test its mettle. The system interface flashed before his eyes, signaling a massive stat increase. Dexterity increased by 110. Aruto grinned, the thrill of power coursing through him. This dagger was a cheat item far beyond his expectations. He mused that a visual skill board would be far superior to mere intuition, realizing this weapon would be the gold standard for all future equipment choices. Yet, even with this god-tier weapon, Aruto knew complacency was death. He had to evolve, to grow stronger by slaughtering the beast that lay ahead. The monsters on this intermediate level were merely appetizers. He resolved to hunt down prey that would truly test his limits. As they moved out, Aruto declared the upper level as their true target. After decimating the remaining foes, they pushed forward into the darkness. Majika silently observed the trail of carnage Aruto left behind. Without hesitation, Aruto dove chaotic melee. A horde of demons surged toward him like a tide. Aruto stood firm, confident in his power. In seconds, the demons were crushed into oblivion by the very rocks Aruto commanded. Watching the dust settle, he exhaled a breath of relief. "We have reached the 50th floor," Aruto announced to Majika. "This is where the real hell begins. The upper level, a high-risk zone where only the elite can hope to survive. The monster strength scales exponentially from here on out. We need to power level aggressively while we have the chance." His eyes were fixed on the path ahead. Majika stared at him intently, finally breaking the silence to ask why he fought monsters in such an unorthodox way. Aruto blinked, genuinely taken aback. Was there a standard operating procedure he didn't know about? If she possessed a more efficient killing method, he eagerly implored her to teach him, his eyes shining with the hunger for strength. Majika clarified her stance. It wasn't about technique. It was the fact that the monsters Aruto had just slaughtered were nightmares even for high-ranking adventurers. She was unsettled by how effortlessly he had annihilated an entire mob. It defied all logic that he possessed such overwhelming power. She stood before him, demanding the truth. Aruto deflected, asking if his combat style seemed strange to her. Majika confirmed that to any outsider, it was beyond abnormal, wondering how he could be so oblivious to his own monstrous strength. In that frozen moment, Aruto realized the truth. Majika was the second person in this world to truly see the monster hiding beneath his skin. Before this moment, Hannah was the only soul who had ever looked past his surface. As he stood there, the memories of his past life came flooding back like a tidal wave. Even when he reached level 99, he was forced to walk the path of the adventurer alone. While others basked in glory and gathered followers, not a single person glanced his way, all because of his cursed low-life stat. Such was the cruel, absolute law of that world. Now, in this new life, Aruto found himself lost in deep contemplation. It seemed Hannah wasn't the only anomaly anymore. At that moment, Majika's curiosity piqued, and she couldn't help but ask if Aruto was truly, entirely human. Flashing a confident, disarming smile, Aruto assured her that he was 100% flesh and blood, but deep inside, the irony wasn't lost on him. It was a difficult truth to swallow, considering he had already died once and crawled his way back from the abyss. Watching him closely, Majika found herself amused by his expression. She decided to accept that he wasn't a monster, just incredibly peculiar. Aruto twitched at her comment. A chime rang out. The system announced a level up, and they pressed deeper into the cavern's shadows. Aruto declared that beasts from the 50th floor were no longer a threat. He suggested they ascend a little higher to find a challenge worthy of their time. His instincts screamed a warning. A terrifying predator should be lurking nearby. As if summoned by his thoughts, a small ogre materialized from the darkness. He remembered the desperate struggles of his previous life against such a beast. Now, curiosity burned within him. How quickly could he end this nightmare now? The monster radiated a bloodthirsty impatience. Majika instantly sensed the danger, noting that its raw power far eclipsed anything they had faced before. She turned to her companion, offering to flank the beast and strike from the shadows. But Aruto shook his head. He would face this enemy alone. Hearing this, fear gripped Majika's heart. Surely he had lost his mind. One slip, one wrong breath, and he would die. Aruto knew the risks, but this was the perfect stage to test the true depths of his power. Steel hissed as he drew his knife. With cold determination, he stepped into the kill zone to face the ogre. In a flash, connected with a thunderous impact, but the ogre's hide was as hard as tempered steel. Yet, his blade still drew blood. Roaring in fury, the beast countered instantly, its claw slashing across Aruto's cheek. Aruto danced away from the next blow. His attacks were working. If he kept moving and hammered the same weak point, victory was inevitable. He landed gracefully after the final, and Majika gasped in disbelief. That's impossible. She stood frozen, unable to comprehend how easily he had slaughtered such a terrifying monster. Aruto wiped the grime from his clothes, barely breaking a sweat. He mused that he hadn't even needed his full power. Perhaps this was just the baseline of his new strength. The slime companion then spat out a massive diamond at his feet. Aruto examined the gem. Puzzled, why would a low-rank monster drop such a legendary treasure? Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The air itself seemed to curdle with a heavy, suffocating malice. "Do you hear that?" Aruto whispered, standing just behind him. The girl frowned, confused by the deadly silence he perceived. Pure instinct screamed at him. He spun to Majika, his voice tight with urgency. "We need to run, now!" But Majika was paralyzed. Escape was a fantasy. She knew that if they moved even an inch, death would claim them instantly. From the deepest shadows, a nightmare emerged. A colossal ogre stepped forth, its massive hand stretching out to crush them like insects. It was a monstrosity wrapped in magical ivy, a parasite known for draining the life force of high-tier creatures to fuel its own twisted evolution. Aruto's mind raced. What was this thing doing on the 70th floor? Monsters of this caliber belonged at least 10 floors higher. He hadn't been sure he could handle the smaller one. Now, he was staring down a mountain of muscle and rage. Stowing the slime safely away, he shot a desperate look at Majika. "Go! Seize this chance and run!" But Majika stood her ground. She could feel the monster's aura, but in her arrogance, she believed it had a limit she could break. Her gauntlets hummed with power. She had trained her entire life to stand as an equal beside the hero she sought. She would not flee now. Yet, watching Aruto, a bitter realization had taken root. Her past efforts were nothing compared to his natural might. With a battle cry, She charged, driven by duty and pride. She launched herself at the Titan. Her blow connected, but it was like striking a mountain. The ogre didn't even flinch. It only roared, its fury doubling as it swung back. She weaved through the attacks, relying on her superior speed. But one hit wouldn't be enough. She needed a barrage. She had to overwhelm it with everything she had. Despite her speed, it ensnared her, crushing her body. Slash Aruto's air blade severed the vines. "Are you hurt?" Aruto demanded. She thanked him, but shame burned in her chest. To be saved by a mere child was a crushing blow to her warrior's pride. Pushing aside the shame, Majika turned her gaze back to the beast. Her aura flared to life once more. No more holding back. Invoking the light that dwells within the shadow, she summoned the radiance of 1,000 stars. Artifact released Star Rain. The sky lit up as she poured her very soul into the strike against the ogre. Her mana drained to 0. She watched with bated breath. Surely, nothing could survive such devastation. As the dust settled, the nightmare remained standing, completely unscathed. Its massive leg rose high, casting a shadow of death directly over Majika. She stared up in paralyzed horror, realizing the crushing truth. She had poured her very soul into that strike, yet it wasn't enough. The Colossus stomped down with earth-shattering force, but in a flash of movement, Aruto was already there. Before the impact could claim her. "Leave the rest to me," he commanded, his voice steady amidst the chaos. He passed her to the slime, entrusting her safety to Rue. The creature wobbled in agreement, and Aruto turned back to the beast. Street was not an option. He dashed forward, knowing he lacked Majika's raw speed, but before he could formulate a plan, the ogre's brutal attack cut through his concentration. Watching him in the path of danger, a desperate scream tore from Majika's throat. Breath ragged, Aruto's instincts screamed. He barely parried the crushing blow, looking for an opening to strike back. His sharp eyes dissected the enemy. Even with its magical defenses, those ivy vines had one fatal flaw: fire. But mere flames wouldn't suffice. The vines would only regenerate endlessly. He needed a decisive strike, a blow that would sever its very connection to life. His grip tightened around the hilt until his knuckles turned white. With a roar, Aruto launched his final assault. Penetrating that iron-like hide was impossible, so he aimed for the singularity, locking onto the weak point. Aruto unleashed a condensed fireball. Aruto slid to a halt, muscles screaming, watching the smoke clear to see if his gamble paid off. His vision blurred to black, and his body gave out. Majika froze, her mind unable to process the impossible sight before her. The ogre had fallen. Aruto had won. He was merely a child, yet with that small body, he had toppled a monster that even she couldn't scratch. That disbelief was her final thought before darkness claimed her consciousness. When their eyes fluttered open, a familiar blue blob was hovering right above their faces. The warm sun kissed their skin as they lay on the grass. How in the world had they survived and escaped to this place? "Did you save us, Rue?" Aruto asked softly. The slime jiggled and let out a proud, chirping sound in confirmation. Overcome with relief, Aruto embraced the squishy savior. "You truly are the best companion in the world." Turning to Majika, his expression hardened. "We can't stay here. It's too dangerous." It was a miracle they hadn't been devoured while they slept. Majika lowered her head in silence before whispering a quiet apology. "I'll head back to the inn first," she murmured. Aruto nodded, deciding he needed a moment alone as well. As she walked away, Aruto's gaze grew intense. There was no mistaking that energy. Could Majika actually wield an artifact? Artifacts. Sacred tools forged by the gods themselves. Items so rare you could count their existence on a single hand. That power was unmistakably Star Rain. And if his memories from his past life were correct, the wielder of that cursed item is destined to die in just 7 years. Later that night, sinking into the warm bathwater, Majika had been suppressing that divine energy this entire time. The artifact known as the Hand of Justice only chose wielders with 2 specific cursed traits. In the future, the Vatican classifies her as criminal element number 5, the disastrous Magia Exterior Terra. She and 5 others will be branded as enemies of God. While the decree hasn't been issued yet, the order for their absolute execution is inevitable. Aruto called out in his mind, "Status window." Instantly, the glowing blue system interface manifested before his eyes. Analyzing the data, he estimated Majika's vitality rank. It was likely already at level 4. Back in the dungeon, her magical aura had dwarfed his own. She possessed a barrier that felt virtually indestructible. She is incomparably stronger than I am right now. Heaven and earth. But even a monster like her will be crushed by the Vatican in 7 years. He slipped beneath the water's surface, the weight of his own powerlessness pressing down on him. Could he truly change the course of history, or was tragedy inevitable? Suddenly, Rue popped into view. Aruto breached the surface, gasping in surprise. "What are you doing here?" He laughed. "Did you want to take a bath too?" The slime wiggled enthusiastically. Taking the hint, Aruto lifted her up and began to gently scrub her jelly-like surface. As he watched her, his expression softened. "We really only made it out alive thanks to you, Rue. I'll scrub you until you sparkle like a gem," he teased. The slime vibrated with pure delight, chirping happily in response. Aruto paused, unsure if she was squirming from joy or ticklishness. Did slimes even have ticklish spots? It was a bizarre thought to have. Suddenly, Rue began to glow. The light was so intense it was nearly blinding. "Wow, do you always shine like a diamond when you're clean?" A warm smile spread across his face. "Does that feel good, girl?" Rue bounced with joy, letting out a squeak of affirmation, but then she suddenly lost her form, melting into a puddle of goo. "Maybe I scrubbed too hard." Aruto panicked slightly. He gently scooped the melting slime back into the warm water to rehydrate. After drying off and carrying the now clean slime back to his room, Aruto sensed a presence. It was Majika, waiting for him. She stood up from the sofa, her expression grave. Sensing the weight of her unspoken, nodded. "Let's take this conversation outside." As Aruto set the glass down, a heavy silence hung between them, the weight of the dungeon still clinging to her unvoiced thoughts. The tension was palpable, thick enough to cut with a blade. Handing her the drink, Aruto broke the quiet. "The sunset. It paints the world in such tragic colors today." Their eyes turned to the horizon, watching day bleed into night. Majika nodded slowly, her knuckles white as she gripped her mug, finally turning her gaze to meet his. Her voice trembled as she confessed, "I arrogantly believed a magician of my caliber could never know defeat. Perhaps my elite training blinded me to reality," she choked out. "But the dungeon showed me the truth, Isa. I was weak. I was a burden. From this moment forth, I walked the path alone," Majika declared, the fire of resolve igniting in her eyes as she locked gazes with Aruto. She explained that his protection was a cage that stifled her growth. She needed solitude. "If I hadn't followed you into the abyss, I would have remained blind to my own frailty." She swore a blood oath to herself. "Mark my words, the next time our paths cross, defeat will be a stranger to me." Turning to face him fully, she threw down the gauntlet. "When we meet again, I won't just be your equal, I will surpass you." Aruto's hands shook, not with fear, but with sudden, overwhelming amusement. He burst into laughter, leaving Majika bewildered by his reaction to her solemn vow. He wiped a tear from his eye, explaining that her worries were unfounded. "Talent is nothing," he said, his voice dropping to a serious whisper. "The only truth in this world is relentless, bone-breaking effort." Clashing their mugs together in a toast to rivalry, Aruto accepted her challenge. "I won't let you overtake me easily. We meet again when our power has multiplied 100-fold. They shared a laugh, celebrating the fire of ambition that now burned within them both. Completely unaware that a calamity was brewing in the shadows, a force so catastrophic it could erase their existence in a single heartbeat, Aruto began the ritual of preparation. He checked his inventory, ensuring every item was accounted for. His eyes lingered on the empty bed where Majika once rested, sealing the memory, and steeled his heart to honor their pact. From that second on, the concept of time vanished. He threw himself into the fires of training with the ferocity of a demon. First, he needed to master the art of creation, opening a dense forest, a perfect sanctuary for cultivation. It was a treasure trove. The land teemed with rare collectible crystals, and the air hummed with dense mana, the perfect fuel for his crafting mastery. He began the grind, channeling raw mana to shatter boulders, refining his control with every strike. The system chimed as proficiency skyrocketed. He mined until his hands bled and healed. Suddenly, A notification flashed. Crafting had hit level 20. Class unlocked blacksmith. Just as he predicted, this path granted him more than just weapons. It unlocked the devastating offensive art known as Grave Reaper. He could now synthesize items from the very essence of the dungeon, weaving fire and magic into tangible destruction. No longer did he need a forge to create miracles. Gripping a blade, Aruto realized that his singular focus had awakened a dormant power within him. Moments later, deep within a cavern, he found himself locked in mortal combat with a high-tier beast. The clash was brutal, teaching him a harsh lesson. He was still too green to ascend to the next hellish floor of the dungeon, but the system rewarded his struggle. Art of the Blade acquired. Level barrier broken. He had surpassed level 40, unlocking the lethal two-handed style. With a predator's grin, Aruto drew his greatsword, unleashing his new monster fell, and his experience bar filled instantly. He realized the synergy was perfect. By alternating between Grave Reaper and the calamitous Typhoon Strike, his skill proficiency soared. He fused these physical arts with magic, creating fissures in the earth that didn't just trap enemies, it obliterated them with high lethality bursts. It was a golden age of growth. The system notifications were a constant symphony level 40 confirmed. All stats and skills boosted by 30 units. Now, the ultimate prize was within reach: manipulation. With trembling anticipation, Aruto summoned the skill window. The description was simple yet profound. The ability to dominate matter, using mana to bend objects to his absolute will. Aruto extended a hand toward a boulder, channeling his will. The stone obeyed, shifting aside. It lacked the flash of Grave Reaper, but the potential was infinite. This was the missing piece. He vowed to hone this telekinetic power until it became an extension of his own limbs. Days bled into weeks, and the biting winds of winter descended. As Aruto walked the city streets, the whispers of the townsfolk drifted to his ears. A particular rumor caught his attention. Two adventurers were gossiping. "Did you hear about the phantom on the upper floors? A total lunatic? They say he massacred 1,000 monsters solo. No party. Just one man leaving a trail of death." The second man shuddered. "I heard he's just a kid. And the creepiest part, he drags a low-level slime around like a pet." As Aruto brushed past them, the realization hit. They were speaking of him. The men froze, eyes widening as they recognized the subject of their fear. In a world where safety lay in numbers, a solo hunter on the upper floors was an anomaly. Aruto observed their shock, realizing his legend was beginning to take root. In the past, he was a ghost, invisible to the world no matter his feats. But the tides had turned. Though being branded a weirdo wasn't exactly flattering. Aruto smirked internally, leaving the stunned strangers in his wake. Returning to the inn, the dungeon called to him, and he would vacate the room for 2 or 3 days. The owner nodded, offering a standard warning to stay safe, before asking a question that lingered in the air. Asked if the girl he arrived with was safe. But the silence that followed struck Aruto cold. He realized he hadn't seen Majika since they parted ways. The innkeeper's expression darkened. She revealed that the young lady hadn't returned for several days, and a true sense of dread began to settle in her eyes. The words hit him like a physical blow. Aruto gripped his jacket, his mind frantically trying to rationalize. It is Majika. She is invincible. There is nothing to worry about. Yet, a cold shiver of premonition crawled down his spine. Suddenly, the thunder of hooves echoed through the streets. A hush fell over the crowd as a knight clad in shining armor arrived. Whispers erupted immediately. The Vatican had summoned its executioner. Panic exploded in Naruto's chest. Without a word, he bolted from the hotel, ignoring the owner's confused cries behind him. He couldn't speak. His mind was a chaotic storm. The future he knew was crumbling, replaced by a terrifying new reality. His interference had rippled out, changing Majika's fate as well. How could he have been so blind? Guilt consumed him. Had the Vatican already signed her death warrant? Was the timeline accelerating toward her execution right now? Aruto ran until his lungs burned, praying to any god that would listen. As he blurred past a carriage, a figure within watched him with amusement. What a sharp intuition. Arriving at the dungeon entrance, desperation clawed at his throat. Please, let her be safe. He expanded his mana sensory field to the limit. A presence as overwhelming as hers should be a beacon in the dark. He just had to find it. There, he spotted a familiar silhouette and shouted her name. Majika turned, her eyes widening in surprise as she recognized him. "It has been a while," she said, her voice calm amidst his storm. "How have you been?" Her casual strength instantly washed away his worst fears. Gasping for air, Aruto managed to nod. Majika raised an eyebrow, questioning why he looked as if he had run a marathon for his life. He didn't tell her the truth, that he was terrified of losing her. So, he forced a smile, masking his panic. "Just out for a jog," he lied smoothly. "Saw you and stopped." Noticing the biting wind, he unwound the scarf from his neck. "It is freezing out here." With gentle care, he wrapped the scarf around her, fussing over her like a worried mother. "Wear this. We cannot have our strongest mage catching a cold." Majika accepted the warmth with a soft look. But their moment of peace was shattered as a strange pressure descended from the heavens. Their gaze snapped upward. Aruto described a swirling abyss of black mana, while Majika confessed that the sight filled her with primal dread. The darkness expanded, pulsing like a malignant heart. The killing intent radiating from it was heavy enough to crush bone. Instinct screamed at Aruto. This was a catastrophe. He used Majika to evacuate the civilians, but before they could move, the sky fractured. From the void stepped a demon, a high-ranking calamity capable of enslaving monsters and leveling nations. Why is a creature of legend in the middle of the city? Aruto's mind reeled. The demon wasted no time. Unleashing a wave of destruction upon the houses, it was an incarnation of ruin, a beast that would not stop until the world was reduced to cinders. No mercy, no negotiation. Yet, in the face of this apocalypse, Aruto froze. The trauma of the past fire seized his legs like shackles. The sheer gap in their hierarchy, the insurmountable wall of status, rendered him a statue. The laws of this world demanded the weak bow to the strong. "Move!" he screamed internally. Aruto strained every muscle, fighting the paralyzing fear, knowing that inaction meant total annihilation. Suddenly, warmth returned to his neck. Majika had placed the scarf back on him. "Do not worry," she whispered. With a burst of speed, she launched herself at the demon. Aruto could only watch, awestruck by the terrifying power she displayed. She had evolved. Her magic was sharper, deadlier. She landed a devastating blow, but the demon's flesh knit back together in seconds. Regeneration. Majika realized instantly that chipping away at its health was futile. She needed one catastrophic hit to vaporize it. She began channeling her ultimate artifact, Star Rain. But the demon was not a mindless beast. It vanished, reappearing behind her faster than thought. Majika spun, barely dodging the lethal swipe. The demon was relentless, suffocating her with attacks, giving her zero time to cast. Dust and debris filled the air. Aruto stared at the shattered pavement, his thoughts consumed by Majika's desperate plight. Rage began to boil within him. Why was he just watching? Why had the last 8 years been so utterly wasted? He had not returned from death just to be a spectator to another tragedy. He refused to let his past failures repeat themselves. His desire for power, for change, ignited a spark. Mana began to coalesce in his trembling hands. Could he cast magic even while suppressed? He had to try. Failure was not an option. His eyes onto Majika's desperate struggle. The demon was overwhelming her. The wind howled against her, and she knew one direct hit from that monster, and she was dead. She needed a split second, just one moment of stillness to unleash her artifact. But the enemy was relentless. Majika was blasted back, skidding across the ground. Despair crept in. This was impossible. The gap was too wide. Even if Aruto was gathering mana, he was too weak, too slow. The demon raised its hand, condensing a sun-sized fireball above its head. Majika looked up at the inferno. She understood this was the end. She closed her eyes, accepting her fate. Aruto roared, unleashing his manipulation skill. Majika snapped her eyes. The fireball was suddenly violently yanked off course. Aruto stared at the redirected attack, eyes wide with disbelief. Had he really done it? Had he truly bent the attack's path to his very will? Suddenly, the demon stumbled. Losing its balance, Majika's gaze locked onto Aruto, realizing in that moment he was not just a survivor, but a young man of terrifying potential. As the beast collapsed toward her, she saw her opening. Now, Aruto roared, his voice light rained down, tearing the demon apart until nothing remained but dust. As the monster vanished, a shared wave of relief washed over them. They had actually succeeded. Majika rushed to his side, panic in her eyes. "Are you all right?" Aruto could barely stand, explaining that the level up had drained his vitality. He just needed a moment to breathe. Before he could protest, she hoisted him onto her back. Aruto stiffened, completely confused by her sudden boldness. "We are going to the hotel," she insisted, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Put me down," Aruto groaned, but she tightened her grip. "You saved my life," she countered softly. "Please, let me do at least this much for you." Later, as they retreated into the shadows, Majika broke the silence. She had never witnessed a technique like his. Aruto confessed it was a new power, the manipulation skill, awakened only recently. To prove it, his mana flared, his scarf moved on its own, wrapping itself instantly around Majika's neck like a living thing. Majika gasped, touching the fabric. You did this." Aruto nodded. With mana, he could command the physical world at will. "I can twist the wind, redirect attacks, and block strikes," he explained darkly. "With enough mastery, I could even control my enemies like puppets on strings." Majika's eyes shone with awe. "That is absolutely incredible." But Aruto shook his head. "It has a fatal flaw. I cannot move while channeling it. Without you, that demon would have torn me apart." He looked her in the eye, his cheeks flushing slightly. "You saved this city, Majika." She smiled back, humble and warm. "I think we saved it together." Aruto chuckled, the tension finally breaking. But as the laughter faded, a cold realization pierced Aruto's mind. He remembered the original timeline. If these demon attacks persisted, the city was doomed to total annihilation. The chilling part was the silence of history. He had no memory of this event, which meant in the original timeline, someone else must have stopped it. But who? Aruto wondered, dread pooling in his stomach. Who else possesses the strength to slay a catastrophe like that? A sudden pressure crushed the air around them. "Stop!" Aruto hissed. Majika turned, confused. "We aren't there yet," she started, but Aruto's face was pale as death. "Stop now." Majika skidded to a halt on the rooftop tiles. Sensing the shift in the atmosphere, Aruto looked down. There, standing amidst the city lights, was a figure draped in black from him, alien and terrifying, as if he belonged to a different dimension entirely. Aruto's blood ran cold. He knew that monster. That was the mage who had murdered Hannah in his past life. It was Gamagan. The man stood still, his gaze cast elsewhere. Majika glanced at Aruto and recoiled. She had never seen such a twisted expression of fear and hatred on his face before. "Who is that?" she whispered. Aruto's voice trembled with suppressed rage. "Gamagan Solway, one of the 12 commanders of Euphonia." Majika's breath caught in her throat. Even she knew the name. Gamagan, the entity known as the strongest magician in the entire world. Before she could process the danger, mana began to swirl violently around Aruto. "What are you doing?" she cried out. "Stay back," Aruto snapped, his eyes burning with vengeance. "This doesn't concern you. I have to kill him. I have to kill him now." Majika grabbed him, desperation in her voice. "Have you lost your mind? Look at yourself. You can barely stand." Aruto glared at her, but she held his wrist in an iron grip. "You are weak from the level up. You are no match for a monster like that. Let go of me," he snarled. "Calm down," she shouted, shaking him. "Don't you understand? You will die. You cannot win this fight today." Rage. Aruto slumped, the mana fading. She was right. In this state, fighting Gamagan was suicide. He leaned against the parapet, crushed by a wave of depression and helplessness. Below them, the strongest magician observed his twisted experiment. A subordinate beside Gamagan spoke up nervously. "Sir, does this mean you summoned the demon? Was this your doing?" "Indeed," Gamagan replied, his voice devoid of empathy. "I acquired a rare summoning artifact. I merely wished to test its capabilities." A pity it was so useless. He scoffed. It could only bring forth a low-ranking ogre, hardly worth the effort. He crushed the artifact in his hand, dust slipping through his fingers, and unfortunately, before I could intervene, some unknown variable disposed of it without difficulty. The subordinate trembled. But sir, even a weak demon possesses the power to wipe out a small state. The 12 commanders exist to protect the kingdom. We obey the royal family to endanger the city like this. It is unacceptable. Gamagan turned slowly, without lifting a finger, invisible force in the air, an unseen noose tightening around his throat. Tell me, Gamagan asked calmly, watching the man struggle. Why do you feel the need to voice such distinctive opinions? Did it never occur to you that silence might prolong your life? The man gasped, choking out desperate apologies as his vision faded. Gamagan released the spell, and the young man crashed to the pavement. Prepare the carriage, the mage ordered. We return to the capital. My research continues. As he walked away, another subordinate approached cautiously. Lord Gamagan, what of the one you are searching for? Do we leave empty-handed? Gamagan paused. That person is not in the city. He replied dismissively. He stepped into the darkness of his carriage, yet, without a doubt, terror would have been unleashed upon them all. He never expected to encounter a nemesis of the Vatican in a place like this. Aruto and Majika froze, paralyzed by the man's overwhelming killing intent. The magician, however, was analyzing them with a twisted curiosity. He deduced that Majika was the one who had exorcised the demon, acknowledging her raw potential. A grotesque hunger filled his eyes as he imagined harvesting the exquisite ingredients her body could provide. Gamagan contemplated dissecting the girl right there on the street, but his rationality held him back. He had received no official order to destroy her yet. To act without the king's command would jeopardize the funding for his dark experiments. It was a gamble the magician was not willing to take. With a cold sneer, he ordered his coachman to move out, certain that the threads of fate would bring the girl before him once again. As the carriage rattled away, Aruto and Majika stared at its fading silhouette, the weight of the monster's gaze still crushing their spirits. Majika's voice trembled as she whispered her fear, convinced that man would eventually kill them. She recognized him as a high commander from Euphonia and turned desperately to Aruto. Aruto stared blankly at a bitter smile forming. He mocked his own arrogance for thinking he stood a chance against a magician of that caliber. But in that moment of humiliation, a fire ignited in his gut. He swore an oath to surpass Gamagan before their paths crossed again. Days passed, and the Lord of Ketagris summoned them, wishing to publicly honor Majika for purging the demon from his domain. Majika, however, rejected the praise instantly. She demanded to know why they had conveniently forgotten about Aruto's contribution. The nobles sneered in uncomfortable silence. They refused to admit that a low-born nobody like Aruto could possess such power. Eventually, the Lord simply dropped the subject. As they wandered through the city streets later, Aruto broke the silence. He asked Majika if she was truly okay with turning down such prestige. Majika's expression was fierce. She vented her frustration, hating how the world remained blind to Aruto's true strength. Aruto replied calmly, his void of emotion. In this world, status and background dictated everything. That was the harsh reality. He smiled softly at her, realizing that only she and Hannah possessed the kindness to look past those rigid social rules. He placed a hand on her shoulder, advising her to channel that anger into training rather than wasting energy on the opinions of sheep. Hearing Aruto speak with such unwavering resolve, Majika couldn't help but worry if he was pushing himself too hard to hide his pain. Aruto casually mentioned diving back into the dungeon tomorrow, but suddenly, his senses flared as they passed a man observing them from the shadows. Aruto halted and spun around. Majika blinked in confusion, asking what had caught his keen attention. He narrowed his eyes. The face was familiar. It was the same man from the guild. Now sitting pitifully on the cold stone pavement, it was Lion, holding a cardboard sign begging for warmth. The moment Lion locked eyes with Aruto, recognition flashed across his grimy face. "Hey, it's you," he shouted, his face twisted in disgust as he claimed he had never seen this man in his life. Lion wasn't having it. He insisted that a handsome face like his was impossible to forget. He launched into a sob story about his financial ruin, hinting loudly that a donation would save his life. Aruto and Majika simply kept walking. Aruto turned his back, deliberately ignoring the beggar to ask Majika which dungeon floor she planned to conquer next. Suddenly, Lion lunged forward, throwing himself at Aruto's feet in a desperate prostrate bow, screaming for coin. Exasperated, Aruto tried to kick him off, demanding to know if the man had shredded his dignity along with his guild membership. Undeterred by the insult, Lion looked up with burning intensity. He declared that he saw destiny in them. The duo just stared at him in dead silence. Lion pointed a thumb at his own chest. He proposed a legendary alliance, an adventuring party that would shake the world. He formally introduced himself as Lion. He wasn't just a beggar, he was a seasoned adventurer offering his services. More hands make light work in battle, he grinned, before dropping a bombshell. Don't be shocked, but my class is hero. It's an ultra-rare profession. Aruto gave him a dry, cynical smile and immediately rejected the offer. Lion looked as if he had been slapped. Aruto scoffed, noting that while the hero class might be rare, he seriously doubted Lion had the skill to make it useful. Majika yawned with boredom in the background while Lion clung to the ground, begging Aruto to reconsider. I left the guild just for this opportunity, he lied. Aruto saw right through him. You mean you were caught stealing funds and got kicked out, right? Lion's jaw dropped. He was stunned that Aruto had deduced the shameful truth so easily. His silence was a confession. Aruto sighed deeply. Dealing with scammers like this was exactly why he preferred the solitary life of dungeon hunting. Lion panicked and tried to tackle Aruto again, wailing to be let into the party. Majika's patience finally snapped. She shoved half a loaf of stale bread into Lion's hands and told him to stop being a nuisance. Lion collapsed in defeat, chewing the bread as Aruto and Majika walked away into the distance. Majika grumbled that all this drama had made her hungry. Aruto chuckled, mentioning he had discovered a hidden gem of a restaurant and offered to treat her. A few days later, slaughtering the mob, his level dinged to 42, and his passive blade mastery hit 43. He inspected his weapon with a satisfied grin. The blade he had forged himself was performing beyond all expectations. Even after days of relentless pursuit, Lion refused to give up the chase. Aruto, however, had his eyes set on the deadly upper floors. Suddenly, chaos erupted. Frantic screams pierced the air as Lion burst into view, a ravenous pack of wolves snapping at his heels. Aruto froze, eyes widening in shock to see him there. Lion screamed, begging desperately for salvation from the beastly horde. Aruto didn't hesitate. Down, he commanded, unleashing a torrent of crimson flame that swallowed the wolves in an instant. As the fire roared, Lion stared in pure awe. That was magnificent. Aruto rushed to the fallen boy. Lion, trembling on his knees, poured out a flood of gratitude for his life. He confessed he'd followed Aruto blindly into the danger zone. Aruto's gaze turned cold. This is no place for a rookie like you. Yet, Lion's resolve didn't waver. He begged once more to join forces with Aruto and Majika. Aruto sighed, his patience snapping. How many times must he say it? Lion was dead weight. He had no time to babysit. Lion bowed his head, whispering a broken apology. Aruto turned his back, cold as ice. If you understand, then leave, now. But in that split second, a shadow lunged. A surviving wolf went straight for Lion's throat. Aruto moved like lightning, cutting the beast down. He spun around to the wounded boy, heart pounding. Are you alive? But what he saw froze his blood. Guilt crashed over him like a tidal wave. This was his fault. If only he had accepted him sooner. Lion wouldn't be lying there, broken on the cold ground. But the moment Lion heard those words, he sprang up like a coiled spring. Really? You mean you might actually accept me? Aruto blinked, his brain short-circuiting. Lion rubbed his neck, grinning sheepishly. Oh, didn't I mention I'm actually a vampire? Aruto stood there, completely thunderstruck. Vampires, the immortal night stalkers of legend, monsters feared by all mankind. But Aruto pointed a shaking finger. Is that really true? Lion shrugged casually. We aren't so different from humans. Most horror stories are just lies made up by scared people. Our bodies work the same way, he clarified. A fatal wound kills us just as dead as anyone else. But, Lion grinned. I am special. I'm invulnerable. Aruto's mind raced. Did he mean high-speed regeneration? Aruto frowned, pointing to the boy's wounds. Then how did you get injured? Long story, Lion sighed, but I have high pain resistance. Aruto leaned in. Could he learn this powerful skill too? Lion shook his head solemnly. No race could simply learn this. And he certainly didn't get it through hard work. He looked Aruto in the eye. If I told you the truth, you wouldn't believe a word. Then, the bombshell dropped. I'm not from this world, Aruto gasped. Lion explained he had once lived in a place called Japan. Just an ordinary guy. Until an accident took his life. But in those final, terrified moments, absolute fear consumed his soul. He prayed desperately not to die, and when he woke up in this new world, he inhabited a body that knew no fear of death. Aruto fell silent, his mind reeling. So, there were others who had crossed the boundary of worlds. But the pain resistance, Lion's voice darkened. That didn't come free. It was forged in the hell of my early years. At first, it seemed like paradise, a vampire body, no fear of death, a hero's calling. He truly felt like the main character of a grand epic. But reality is cruel. A religious purge swept through Euphonia, and Lion watched his parents butchered before his eyes because he couldn't die. They didn't kill him. They dragged him to the church, branding him a heretic. In the name of divine justice, the torture began, endless, relentless. His body refused to die, but his nerves felt every scream of agony. Every day was a living nightmare. He prayed for death, his only salvation. Yet, the curse of life held on. 50 years. It took 50 years for his mind to break. And then, silence. He could no longer feel a single drop of pain. He stood amidst the flames of a bonfire, feeling nothing. That was his chance. He ran for centuries, hiding his true face from the world. Eventually, his wandering led him to Ketagris, and the guild became his hiding place. Lion finished his tragic tale, looking at Aruto with weary eyes. That is why you can never acquire this skill. Aruto was speechless. The sheer weight of that suffering was suffocating. He whispered a quiet apology for digging up such scars. Lion offered a gentle smile. Don't worry, he said softly. Those ghosts are long gone. Yet, one shadow remained. If only he had possessed true strength back then, he could have saved his family. That was the lament of his soul. And hearing it, Aruto felt a memory stir within his own past life. Lion clenched his fist. He was here to get stronger. He asked once more to join the team, but Aruto simply turned and walked away. Lion watched in silence, his eyes scanning Aruto and dismissing him as utterly useless. But then, Aruto threw down the gauntlet. How long do you plan to just stand there? He taunted. He dared Lion to step forward, questioning if the boy was terrified of the hellish training that awaited him. To his surprise, Lion's face lit up with pure, unadulterated joy. He accepted the challenge with a radiant beam. Watching Lion play innocently with the slime, a realization struck Aruto deep in his soul. Though this boy could never grasp the eternal torment of an immortal life, they shared the same burning desire to protect their loved ones. Aruto knew. In that moment, he could never abandon someone with such a spirit. And so, the training from hell began. Aruto threw himself back into the fray, sharpening his deadly instincts with the chilling power of the Grave Reaper. Moments later, the very enemies Aruto had spared launched a surprise ambush on Lion. Panic rose in the boy's voice as he screamed for his master. Aruto assessed the horde instantly. The numbers were overwhelming, but the real problem was Lion fighting like a fragile human, denying his true nature. As Aruto tore through the monsters in a whirlwind of destruction, Lion could only cower, shielding his head from the chaotic onslaught. Aruto's voice cut through the noise. Strategy is important, he roared, but you are a vampire. He commanded Lion to stop holding back and unleash the terrifying strength flowing through his veins. He tossed a blade to a student. Lion caught it, a fire igniting in his eyes, and immediately charged into the heart of the battle. With a single, devastating strike, the enemies fell. Lion turned to Aruto, bowing his head in respect. You were right, master. In that instant, Aruto finally glimpsed the boy's true, dormant potential. As the sword danced in Lion's grip, Aruto asked for his status. Lion checked his system window. He had already reached level 4. Aruto paused. That was already on par with Majika. Determination set in. From this day forward, his sole mission was to mold Lion into a monster. They ground their skills relentlessly. Lion's level, his very life force, surged upward at a truly terrifying pace. At first, his movements were clumsy, but he evolved in the blink of an eye, surpassing even Aruto's expectations. They cleared dungeons with a speed that defied logic. Every 10 floors, Majika joined their party to crush the area boss. The floors melted away beneath their feet. Standing over the corpse of a massive beast, Lion smirked at his teacher. "Our clear time," he declared with newfound arrogance, "is going to be absolutely legendary." Majika never dreamed they would conquer the 90th floor so soon. Yet, 6 years later, Aruto stood triumphant over the fallen boss. He turned to his companions, gratitude in his eyes for their unwavering loyalty. His eyes were set on the 100th floor, but the sands of time were slipping through his fingers. He announced that from this second on, the game had evolved to a completely different dimension. The clock was ticking, Hannah's death, without wasting a moment. Aruto packed his gear and prepared to leave the guild behind. The guildmasters were stunned, asking if he was truly abandoning them. Aruto confirmed his exit, thanking them for the shelter they had provided. The receptionist's voice trembled, admitting that the guild hall would feel empty and lonely without his presence. Aruto revealed his destination, a prestigious academy in the capital of Euphonia. But before he could leave, the sound of rushing footsteps echoed from the stairs. Majika and Lion were coming. Lion confronted him, his voice heavy with betrayal. "Are you really just leaving the city like this?" Majika stood beside him, blindsided by the news. She hadn't heard a whisper of this plan. Aruto had his friends, facing their interrogation. Why the secrecy? Aruto simply replied that he had planned to say his goodbyes properly, but internally, his mind was racing. Hannah's death was looming. 1 year. That was all he had to rewrite destiny and save her. A clash with the catastrophic Gamagan was inevitable. This war could cost him his life, and he refused to drag innocent souls into the crossfire. Lion observed Aruto's grim expression, sensing the unspoken weight. "He has his reasons," he murmured. Majika stepped forward, her eyes blazing with resolve. "I'm going with you," she declared. "I still haven't repaid the debt I owe you from 6 years ago." She crossed her arms, making it clear she would not let Aruto escape after they had come this far together. Lion grabbed Aruto in a crushing embrace. "Of course I'm coming," he shouted. "A student must always follow in his master's footsteps. For 6 years, no one has grown stronger than us," Majika added with a fierce smile. "If anything happens, we will be the ones to save you, Aruto." Aruto blinked in surprise, then a warm laugh escaped his lips. He realized he had no choice. "Fine," he smiled. "We go together." And so, the trio boarded the carriage, setting off toward a new fate. As they traversed the winding mountain roads, Lion sat back, yawning loudly and complaining of the crushing boredom. "Have we really been driving for 4 days?" he groaned. "Where are we even going?" Aruto replied mysteriously. "Once we descend this mountain, you will see everything with your own eyes." "If you're so bored," Aruto suggested, "you could join me." He was already meditating, focusing his mana even while sitting. Majika sat quietly beside him, her gaze lingering on Aruto's disciplined form. Hearing the offer, Lion immediately declined. "Only you," he scoffed, "could possibly train by just sitting still like a statue." Majika shifted the topic to the mission ahead. "What is the plan once we reach Euphonia?" Aruto dropped the bombshell. "I intend to enroll in school. Specifically, the Royal Court Academy, the most exclusive and elite institution in the entire empire." Lion's jaw dropped. "School?" he stammered, questioning why a warrior of Aruto's caliber needed to study behind a stoic mask. Suddenly, the carriage lurches violently, nearly throwing Aruto from his seat with a startled shout. Aruto and Majika exchange terrified glances. The coachman announces a disaster. The wheel is hopelessly wedged in a deep rut. He warns them that their journey might end right here. Majika turns to Aruto, panic in her eyes, asking for a plan. Aruto buries his face in his hands, sensing a headache coming on. Rising to his feet, Aruto looks at Majika with grim determination. There is no other choice. They must walk the rest of the way. But Lion interjects, his voice booming with confidence. He assures Aruto that walking is when they have him. A moment later, the driver asks if they can dislodge the wheel. Lion ignores him, unfurling his belt and dismissing such a petty solution. He declares the driver's services are no longer required, ordering the man to unhitch the horse and leave immediately. With godlike strength, Lion rips the entire chunk of earth beneath the carriage right out of the ground and begins sprinting through the mountains, carrying the whole vehicle on his back. In his mind, this chaotic method of transport is the height of heroism. He is eager to prove his speed, slamming the carriage back down on solid ground. Lion turns to his master, asking if his performance was satisfactory. But inside, it is absolute chaos. The teacher notes that Aruto and Majika are sprawled on top of each other, dizzy from the immense G-force of the run. Aruto, visibly annoyed and nursing a throbbing bump on his head, calls Lion over. He threatens to leave the brute behind if he ever pulls a stunt like that again. Lion sits down, confused by the scolding. He muses that Aruto should be grateful for the speed. Glancing back at the vast distance they covered, he remains confident that his brute force saved the day. Before long, the Majika and Lion to handle the luggage he has urgent business to attend to. Leaping from the carriage, Aruto sprints toward the city gates. His legs pump furiously, but his mind is fixed on only one thing, Hana. She is here. She is close. His dear, irreplaceable Hana. Memories of their shared past compel him toward the Royal Academy with magnetic force. Even if the red string of fate does not bind them as lovers in this life, his soul yearns just to see her face again. Meanwhile, amidst the bustling city streets, Hana freezes. A woman beside her asks why she looks so startled. Hana clutches her chest. Her heart has started pounding like a war drum, a sensation telling her that someone she has waited for is incredibly near. She has never felt such an smiles mysteriously, suggesting, who knows? Perhaps the person destiny has chosen for you is standing just around the corner. Intrigued by the concept of a fated partner, Hana asks who he might be. The woman admits she cannot see the future, but she assures Hana not to worry. The moment their eyes meet, the truth will be undeniable. Hana questions how she could recognize a stranger, but she accepts that the arrangements of destiny are beyond human understanding. At that precise second, Aruto bursts from the tunnel into the city, standing mere feet away from where she stands. Lion and Majika finally enter the city gates. Lion surveys the metropolis, remarking that this grand architecture is truly a city fit for a hero like Aruto. Aruto, whom they have just caught up with, asks what Lion is muttering about. Lion explains that in his previous world, magnificent cities like this were always teeming with work for legendary heroes. Aruto is momentarily speechless at the simple logic, but he explains that this is the heart of the kingdom, home to 3 million souls. He directs Lion's gaze toward the royal castle, pointing out the administrative center of the entire nation. The streets are lined with the mansions of high aristocracy, and looming opposite the castle stands the imposing state church of Fort Miss. Aruto emphasizes the need for absolute discretion here. Suddenly, Lion senses the energy of Fortemis from the church and declares his intense revulsion for that holy ground. After checking into a hotel, Aruto asks what his companions plan to do. He intends to focus entirely on preparing for the Royal Academy's brutal entrance exams. Lion is shocked that even a powerhouse like Aruto needs to take an exam. Aruto clarifies that for the best school in the country, proving one's worth is only natural. The city boasts an adventurer's guild and a dungeon, though they are smaller than the ones in Ketagris. Aruto suggests that finding excitement shouldn't be hard for them. He gives them his lodging details, urging them to reach out only if absolutely necessary. Lion confirms they will stay out of trouble. After exchanging a knowing glance with Majika, they leave Aruto to his mission. As Aruto approaches the Royal Academy for the admission campaign, the sheer scale of the competition hits him. This year, 10,000 hopefuls are vying for a mere 100 spots. Finding Hana in the sea of people feels like searching for a needle in a haystack. Aruto decides to scout the campus while he has the chance. Passing a simple bench, he stops dead in his tracks. A memory from his past life flashes before his eyes. It was the very spot he and Hana used to share. 70 years have passed since those days. Aruto clenches his fist, resolving that if he succeeds here, fate will surely bring them together again. Suddenly, a familiar sight catches his eye. It is Lion, desperately pleading with a member of the admissions committee to break the rules. The girl firmly refuses. Aruto stares in disbelief. Why are Lion and Majika here, threatening to ruin his peaceful school life? Lion locked eyes with Aruto before turning to the instructor. Majika stepped forward, her voice ringing with confidence as she declared their intent to challenge the entrance exam. But Lion immediately cut in, exposing her little white lie without hesitation. Her true motive was solely to get Aruto enrolled. Majika instantly silenced him with a sharp blow, commanding him to shut his mouth. Sprawled on the floor, Lion groaned, demanding to know why she hit so hard. Looming over him, she retorted that if she had used her full power, he would never have stood up again. An admissions officer cleared his throat, coldly asking Aruto for the required exam fee. Aruto blinked, genuine shock written all over his face at the mention of money. Still kissing the dirt, Lion confessed they were broke and had tried to haggle. Aruto's expression darkened as he asked what happened to their accumulated savings. Majika sighed, revealing that Lion had squandered every copper on high-end cuisine while touring the elite district. Aruto began to lecture them, his voice stern as he scolded their recklessness during his absence. Suddenly, a chilling voice cut through the air, complaining about the noise. A violent gust of wind magic. Academy was a sanctuary of noble tradition, not a playground for uncivilized peasants. Aruto's eyes narrowed. He recognized that face instantly. Deutsch. Lion stepped up, boldly demanding the stranger's identity while pointing out his hypocrisy. Calling them uncivilized while throwing magic around, Lion clenched his fist, aura flaring as he prepared to throw down right there and then. Aruto intercepted him immediately, warning Lion to stand down. Attacking a professor now would destroy their chances before the exam even began. Aruto's mind raced, recalling everything he knew about Deutsch's twisted character. The man was obsessed with status and lineage. Deutsch scanned them with disgust, asking about their origins while mocking their commoner appearance. His gaze landed on Aruto, and his expression turned even colder. Do you truly intend to take this exam with a pathetic first-level mana core? Aruto stared back, taken aback by the precise assessment. Deutsch waved him off, advising him to crawl back home. His success rate was absolute 0, and paying the fee would be throwing gold into a fire. Sneering at Majika and Lion, Deutsch added that trash tends to travel in packs, and none of them stood a ghost of a chance. Aruto's expression remained calm. Deutsch left him no choice. He mentally thanked the arrogant professor for the motivation. He slammed a heavy bag of coins onto the table. Aruto declared he would enroll, proving his worth not with cheap talk, but with undeniable results. He held a firm conviction about this academy. Despite Deutsch's prejudice, true instructors would judge based on merit alone. Aruto turned on his heel and walked away. Deutsch watched their retreating figures, stunned by the sheer audacity. Aruto's arrogance was practically suffocating. A mere first-level weakling acting like a king fine. Deutsch decided he would personally witness just how spectacularly this boy would fail. Smirking at the thought, the professor turned and vanished in the opposite direction. The ordeal was split into 2 hellish stages, a written theory exam before lunch, and a brutal practical test to follow. Tension filled the exam hall. Aruto stared down at his paper, tasked with a complex calculation regarding troop movements. He had to synchronize 3 units cavalry at 10 kilometers an hour, infantry at 4, and supply wagons at 2, all converging on a target 30 kilometers away. As his quill danced across the paper, Aruto shot a worried glance at Lion. Lion looked like his brain was melting. While Majika breezed through the questions, her preparation clearly paying off. Aruto shook his head. He couldn't afford to get distracted now. Suddenly, a shadow fell over his desk. Deutsch loomed over him, silently mocking. Deutsch vowed there would be no mercy in the practical exam, which he would personally supervise. The sharp tap of a cane echoed through the hall. Deutsch announced that the real nightmare of the practical exam was beginning. He pointed a gloved hand toward a mysterious object. The objective was simple, yet impossible: destroy the magical cube placed before the podium. Any force would be useless. Our heroes Y1. Students stepped up, unleashing their strongest spells, but the cube didn't even scratch. It remained unyielding, mocking their efforts. Deutsch scribbled in his notebook, dismissing this entire batch as hopeless weaklings. A smirk tugged at his lips. Who could possibly shatter this enhanced magic? He muttered, knowing the answer was no one. Suddenly, Majika stepped onto the field. Lion roared from the sidelines, hyping her up to show them true power. She silenced him with a glance, focusing her aura. Deutsch narrowed his eyes. It was that troublesome squirrel from the office. Her name rang a bell, but he dismissed it. It wouldn't matter soon enough. She is merely a lowly beastkin, likely dependent on raw physical power. However, make no mistake, this reinforced magic barrier is absolute top tier. It is impossible to destroy with a half-hearted attack, Deutsch sneered. Yet, Majika hoisted the heavy cube, her eyes instantly dissecting its hidden arcane mechanisms. With a single, surgical strike, she cracked the outer shell, then the entire structure shattered into dust. The arena exploded with thunderous applause. The students read, cheering for Majika, who had conquered the impossible trial. Deutsch witnessed the spectacle, his mind refusing to accept reality. That was no ordinary punch. It possessed speed and precision beyond human limits. As he replayed the attack in his mind's eye, the terrifying truth dawned on him. She hadn't struck once. She had landed countless blows on the exact same coordinate in a split second. A chilling memory struck him like lightning. Majika Estate Terra. The very same entity designated by the Vatican as a catastrophe class risk factor. Why has such a monster descended upon our school? He muttered in disbelief. Composing himself, he announced, "She passes. Next candidate, Lion." As the boy approached the artifact, his confidence bordered on arrogance. "I am up next," Deutsch scoffed internally, dismissing him as nothing more than an ignorant fool. Certainly not a designated threat like the last one. Suddenly, Lion summoned a sphere of energy directly above the target, warning the crowd to brace themselves. In a flash of blinding light, existence itself seemed to bend, shielded his eyes with his staff, struggling to comprehend the sheer scale of the devastation. Standing amidst a million glittering fragments of the destroyed cube, Lion tilted his head innocently. Was that within the normal range? Deutsch stood frozen, his mind reeling in shock as he stared at the young monster. In decades of proctoring, never had he witnessed such absolute annihilation of the testing equipment. Veins popped on his forehead, a mix of fear and fury. Through gritted teeth, Deutsch declared, "This candidate passes." Lion leaned in with a grin, acknowledging his victory. "What a relief," he chirped. "I was worried the shockwave might have injured you, Professor." Visibly shaking, Deutsch called for the next soul to step forward. His face, however, screamed of a desperate need for a respite to recover his sanity. In a blink, the testing grounds were magically restored to their pristine state, yet Deutsch remained bewildered. How could self-taught brats, including a Vatican target, decimate his exam site? In all the history of this academy, there have never been such results. White stammered to the High Council of Professors, reporting the unprecedented anomaly. The admissions committee murmured, deep concern etched on their faces regarding these new applicants. "Are we truly certain about welcoming such volatile elements into our halls?" one elder questioned. Another professor's eyes gleamed with ambition. "Their abilities are at the 4th level. If they join the Euphonia army, they will bring unparalleled glory to our institution. But their temperament is a ticking time bomb," another voice countered sharply. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Deutsch, the weight of the decision resting on his shoulders. He sighed, acknowledging their behavioral flaws. "However," he argued, "geniuses with a 4th standard aptitude do not simply walk through our gates every day." The logic held. The professors nodded, convinced that under Deutsch's strict guidance, these monsters could be tamed into excellent students. Swayed by Deutsch's insistence, the council finally slammed the gavel. The new students were accepted. As Deutsch reviewed the final roster, his eyes narrowed at a single name, Aruto. Despite past fame, the boy was a dropout with a measly 1st standard aptitude. By all regulations, he was trash to be discarded. A grim shadow cast itself over Deutsch's heart. If a failure like Aruto passed, it would forever stain the Academy's prestigious reputation. Deutsch secretly prepared a forbidden technique Elo spell within the cube. He resolved to crush Aruto's chances at any cost. With a dark smirk, he placed a specially reinforced cube onto the stage for all to see. He announced the resumption of the exams with a calm facade, or eternally. However, he vowed to gatekeep the Academy from such lowly first-class trash. This was no ordinary target. It was enchanted with Alo's absorption. A nasty trap that made the cube harder to break the more force was applied to it. Even a grand mage would struggle to scratch it. Confident in his scheme, Deutsch signaled the start of the next trial. But the figure stepping onto the stage wasn't Aruto who, Deutsch cursed internally. His plan hitting would be next. There were 3 prior candidates, but this unknown young man had not been with them at the registration desk. Skeptical that this random nobody could pass the rigged test, Deutsch waved his hand dismissively. Begin. The student launched a pathetic attack on the enchanted cube. Watching the display, Deutsch sneered. Is this the level of today's applicants? This boy has 0 mana control. Absolutely pathetic. Why was I so worried about Aruto when trash like this exists? Just as Deutsch opened his mouth to declare a failure, the atmosphere shifted. The cube began to pulsate with a terrifying instability. Deutsch watched, paralyzed, as raw energy erupted from the core. A torrent of crimson mana exploded outward, the shockwave nearly knocking the proctor off his feet. The entire arena fell silent, staring down into the pit. Confusion rippled through the crowd at the unfolding spectacle. Whispers about the previous prodigies vanished instantly. This was no longer a test, it was a disaster. The mana was rampaging out of control. Suddenly, a figure leaped from the stands. Aruto descended like a hawk, roaring, "Everyone evacuate, I will contain the mana burst." As Aruto landed, a violent whirlwind of energy coalesced before him. His sharp eyes narrowed. This wasn't just a simple mana rampage. A catastrophe was brewing in the heart of the storm. He glanced at Deutsch, seeing the proctor buckling under the immense pressure. His protective barriers were fracturing like glass. One wrong move, and this entire arena would be reduced to ashes. Deutsch rushed forward to assist the student, desperation clouding his eyes, but his reserves were dry. His mana pool was completely empty. Disaster was imminent. Trapped in the howling vortex, he desperate, but the frail shield shattered like glass against the storm. He was powerless to sustain it. Suddenly, a new force cut through the chaos. Aruto, wielding a mysterious power to quell the raging tempest. Deutsch stared, his jaw slack with disbelief. Aruto stepped calmly into the eye of the storm, asking if everyone was unharmed. The teacher could only stammer, How are you doing this?" "I merely followed protocol," Aruto replied, his voice steady amidst the gale. "Your priority was the shield. Protecting the students matters more than the method." "Leave the mana outburst to me," he commanded, his authority cutting deeper than the wind. Deutsch snapped back, "Don't be a fool. This is beyond a student's capability." But Aruto's gaze remained unspoken steel. The teacher screamed a warning. The unstable cube was a ticking time bomb. One wrong move, and we're all dead. It's going to detonate. Ignoring the danger, Aruto extended a hand. He didn't flinch. He began to channel his energy directly into the volatile core. Deutsch watched, paralyzed by the sheer audacity. Was he nullifying? Despite his injuries, Aruto's focus was absolute. The violent energy surrendered to his touch, the cube's hum fading as he cradled it safely in his palm. "It seems the Alo spell was forced onto this artifact," Aruto observed, examining the dormant cube. He turned to the teacher. "This academy only caters to the elite, the powerful. It's no surprise you missed the signs. This particular spell is a paradox. It only activates in the presence of incredibly weak magic. Its unique signature makes it invisible to the strong." Deutsch stared at the young man, his mind reeling. Who is he really? The teacher recalled his earlier judgment. Aruto, a commoner with the lowest standard of living. He had been wrong. Even from the humblest origins, true greatness could be forged through relentless effort and iron will. Suddenly, the cube crumbled to dust, its energy spent. The silence was deafening until Deutsch finally spoke. "Aruto, you pass." Cheers erupted as the successful examinees were celebrated. Soon after, the group found themselves at a high-end boutique to fit their new academy uniforms. "Splendid," the tailor exclaimed. Aruto and his team stepped out, transformed. The noble attire gave them an aura of undeniable prestige. Lion tugged at his collar, eyes wide. "I've never touched fabric this expensive in my entire life." Aruto smiled at his friend. "It suits you, Lion. You look like you were born for this." Silence. Lion blinked, Unsure how to process the compliment before turning to Aruto for reassurance. You really think so? Just then, Majika stormed out, looking miserable. Do they have anything practical? This feels like a torture device. She tugged at the skirt, frustrated. I can't fight in this. It restricts my move freezing. The boys froze. Despite her complaints, the uniform captured her elegance perfectly. She looked every bit the noble lady. Lion smirked, unable to resist. Well, you know what they say, even a stump looks good in a headdress? Whack. Majika's fist met his skull instantly. I didn't give you permission to bark. Nursing the bump on his head, they proceeded to finalize their orders together. Are the measurements to your liking? The tailor asked. They nodded in unison. The fit was flawless. The tailor handed over the invoice. They will be ready in 2 weeks. That will be 10 gold coins per person. The heir left the room. 10 gold. Their faces went pale. Surely, this was a joke. Aruto noticed the heavy silence. What's the matter? Why do you look like you've seen a ghost? 10 gold. Lion whispered, voice trembling. That's enough to feed a family for 6 months for clothes. Aruto realized the grim truth. His friends were broke. He sighed, reaching for his purse. I'll cover it. We don't have a choice. Absolutely not, Majika interjected, pride flaring. You already paid our exam fees. We cannot burden you further. Desperate, they turned to the tailor. Can we pay upon pickup? The merchant smiled. Of course, that is acceptable. With the deadline set, they grabbed Aruto and practically kidnapped him. Destination, the Adventurers Guild. Mission, get rich quick. Wait a minute, Aruto stammered, being hauled away. Why am I being dragged into this? You're our mentor, aren't you? Lion grilled him. You can't abandon your students in their hour of need. Within moments, they stood before the guild's quest board. They scanned the parchment. Goblin extermination, 12 copper coins. Giant sewer rat, 20 silver coins. Lion scoffed, shaking his head. Peanuts. These rewards are pathetic. At this pace, we won't make 10 gold in a year, let alone 2 weeks. We need something bigger before we hit the capital. Lion's eyes locked onto a poster. Jackpot, 30 gold coins. Aruto squinted at the request. 30 gold. What kind of suicide mission is that? Lion read the fine print, excitement fading into dread. Objective, subjugate the fire dragon of the northern mountains. Absolutely not, Aruto stated, his voice final. The group blinked at him. Why, it pays the bills. Dragons aren't just monsters, Aruto explained, a shadow crossing his face. They are survivors of the god war from a century and a half ago. Just one of them waking up isn't a fight, he warned, his eyes dark. It's a calamity capable of wiping this entire nation off the map. Majika questioned the very existence of such nightmare fuel, but Aruto knew the terrifying truth. In his past life, he had looked death in the eye and crossed blades with a true dragon. Even at level 99, fleeing was his only salvation. Lion then voiced the obvious doubt. He argued that 30 gold coins was a laughably insulting sum compared to the suicidal risk involved. As a veteran of the guild, he knew 1,000 gold coins was the bare minimum for such madness. Majika suspected foul play, wondering if the quest itself was a deceptive trap set by enemies. But Lion stood firm, citing the strict oversight of the committee that filtered out lies. Disinformation was impossible here. For Aruto, this was the golden opportunity to rewrite destiny. Sensing a hidden truth behind the request, Aruto's curiosity spiked, and he made the call to accept the mission. Lion took charge immediately, promising to handle the logistical nightmare as they departed. Aruto warned them sternly, facing a mythical beast required absolute perfection and preparation. But shadows were watching. 1 week later, the grind continued against lesser beasts. Perched atop a conquered boar, Majika vented her irritation at the endless parade of weaklings. She suspected a scam, but Lion scanned the horizon, unconvinced by her doubts. As twilight swallowed the land, Aruto gazed at the fallen monster and ordered them to make camp. Under the stars, the campfire crackled. Lion declared that shared meals were the true treasure of their journey. Fingering a slime fragment, Aruto calculated the value of their harvest. Selling these magic stones and materials would finally cover the cost of their combat uniforms. Though the dragon remained elusive, he decided they would retreat to Euphonia at dawn. Majika confessed that these days of adventure would be missed, and Aruto felt a similar pang in his heart. But the night was not over. He had a special gift prepared for this very moment. He revealed hand-forged pendants, masterpieces created with his blacksmithing soul, and bestowed one upon each friend. Touching the metal, Majika felt a surge of mana, gentle yet terrifyingly potent. In his past life, loneliness was his shadow, yet here he was, bathed in the warmth of companionship. Such a future was once a dream, and these pendants were the physical form of his gratitude. With a rare smile, Aruto thanked them, and silence fell as the group succumbed to slumber. Suddenly, Aruto awoke. The air was scorching, suffocating them until everyone jolted from their sleep. They emerged into a living hell. The entire forest was screaming in an inferno of crimson flames. A piercing roar shattered the night. There was no mistake the dragon had come for them. The intel was real. The beast was draped in living fire, an avatar of destruction warning them to flee or die. Lion hesitated, thinking of loot, but his friends dragged him away before greed became his grave. A breath of fire incinerated the spot where Lion had just stood. Death missed them by a mere inch. Smoke curled from Lion's legs. The heat alone was searing his flesh. Encircled by a wall of fire, Majika realized escape was impossible. Their only path was to slay the monster. Aruto searched his memories. Dragons of the past were sentient, capable of human speech. But this beast was silent and compact, a deviation that signaled a far more terrifying level of power. He steeled his heart. He could not falter here, not if he wanted to save Hannah in the future. He unleashed a water slash technique, aiming to exploit the elemental weakness of the fire beast. But the dragon instantly manifested a mana shield, a high-tier defense that left Aruto shocked. He knew Majika lacked the firepower to breach it, yet she charged forward with reckless bravery. Lion joined the fray, but Majika felt the despair of hitting an immovable mountain. Their strikes were like pebbles against a fortress. The dragon's vitality was barely scratched. Relying on his regression knowledge, Aruto hunted for a weak point and roared for Majika to draw aggro. While he prepared a critical strike, Majika tried to taunt the beast, but her efforts were futile against such rage. Lion scrambled away from the flames, screaming in confusion as the dragon targeted him despite his lack of aggression. Aruto realized that changing tactics now was a gamble, but utilizing Lion's ability to draw aggro was their only path to victory. Turning to his tank, Aruto declared that he had formulated a brilliant plan. Lion urged his master not to time, only to be hit with a shocking command. Aruto was practically begging him to let the dragon strike him. Lion stood there, utterly dumbfounded, unable to process the request, even with an immortal body, simply standing there to take a beating when against his warrior instincts. Aruto looked him in the eye, promising to use his magic to debuff the dragon, pleading for Lion to trust him just this once. With no other option, Lion grit his teeth and reluctantly placed his faith in Aruto. "What a cruel master I serve," Lion muttered, bracing his shield against the coming storm. Aruto unleashed a hacking spell to disrupt the enemy's defenses, and together they held the line. Then, Aruto roared for Majika to strike. Majika's sharp eyes spotted a gap in the abdominal scale. The dragon howled in agony. Seeing momentum, she knew she had to end this now. "Freezing Star," she cried, unleashing her ultimate frost technique. But as Majika readied the next blow, the dragon's tail whipped around like a siege weapon, slamming into her and sending her crashing to the earth. Silent and motionless, terror gripped Aruto and Lion's hearts, but just as death seemed certain, the pendant around her neck flared with light, its anti-death mechanic activating instantly. As gravity tried to claim her, the artifact pulled against the force. This divine equipment defied the laws of physics, guiding her fall and ensuring the impact did not claim her life. Majika struggled to rise, but the massive claw was already descending to crush her into dust. Her comrades screamed her name, the ground shook, but when it lifted its foot, there was nothing but empty air. The beast looked around in confusion, unable to process her disappearance. In the nick of time, Aruto had snatched her from the jaws of death. Lion supported her weight, admitting he never knew the grave spell could be utilized for teleportation like that. In desperate times, Aruto panted, "It is the perfect evasion tool." Lion held Majika close, checking her condition. She nodded weakly, confirming she was alive. Lion then turned to Aruto, demanding to know where the antidote was. "It was in the tent, the one the dragon incinerated." Aruto replied grimly, but suddenly, the little slime nudged Aruto, offering an item. Aruto's jaw dropped. The slime had looted the antidote before the fire lion laughed, clapping Aruto on the shoulder and praising the little guy. They administered the potion immediately. Color returned to Majika's face for her carelessness. She confessed that without the pendant Aruto had gifted her, her journey would have ended right there. But now, the fire in her eyes was back. She was ready to show this lizard her true power. The boys told her to rest, insisting they would handle the beast while she stayed hidden. Majika refused. I can still fight, she argued. Lion cannot tank that monster alone, and who will deal the damage if I hide? Lion stared at her intense resolve. Aruto sighed, realizing she was right. They needed a new plan. While they huddled for a quick strategy meeting, the predator continued to hunt for its prey. Moments later, Lion stepped into the open. Hey, what are you looking for, you overgrown lizard? He shouted, mocking the beast. I am right here. The dragon's eyes locked onto him, and it charged with earth-shaking fury. Lion knew he only needed to survive for 60 seconds while Aruto prepped the trap. He smashed a tree, shouting, I am not fast like the girl, so do not expect me to dance. But when it comes to durability, he grinned, I am second to none. The dragon incinerated the tree Lion threw. Not slowing down for a second, Lion glanced back. Aruto, how much longer? The preparations are 99% complete, Aruto yelled. Just buy me a few more seconds. Desperate, Lion hurled a stone to keep its attention. The beast dodged free, stepping right into the magic circle Aruto had laid. Got you. As the chains of light bound the dragon, Lion unleashed a heavy smash to keep it pinned. Suddenly, Majika's voice rang out. Is it fast, or is it just rushing blindly towards me? Aruto screamed a warning. The bind will only last 10 seconds. If we miss this window, we are dead. Lion crouched, ready to launch his teammate. Ready, shorty, she scoffed. Are you seriously asking me that now? With a roar of exertion, Lion hurled Majika into the sky like a cannonball. Go! Majika activated Twinkling Star and Fist of Dreams, raining destruction down, countering with a massive breath of fire. As she fell through the smoke, Majika smirked. Sorry, big guy. That was the wrong move. The beast had low intelligence and fell for the bait hook, line, and sinker by forcing it to look up at her. It had exposed its vital weak point to the ground now. It was up to Lion to deliver the execution blow. Wielding the Sword of Courage, Lion unleashed a devastating strike, cleaving the dragon's head from its body in a single, clean motion. The behemoth crashed to the ground, and the entire triumph, celebrating a victory forged by their flawless teamwork. Eyes shining, Lion turned to Aruto, asking if he had finally earned the right to call himself a true dragon slayer. Aruto nodded, praising the magnificence of the strike. Lion beamed with pure joy, shouting, I finally grasped it. That felt absolutely legendary. However, Majika watched with a frown, unable to comprehend why Aruto had entrusted the crucial finishing blow to someone like Lion. Lion recoiled at her sharp gaze, wondering if she intended to pick a fight immediately after their hard-won battle. But then, Majika's expression softened. She admitted frankly that Lion had pulled his weight today, and she would trust his strength when the next crisis struck. Lion stared at Majika, utterly confused. He couldn't tell if she was praising him or if the battle had simply driven her insane. Aruto watched them silently. Suddenly, a wave of intense vertigo washed over the entire group. Clutching her temples, Majika groaned. Is this the backlash? Are we dizzy from a mass level up? Aruto checked his system window. The numbers were climbing rapidly. He had jumped 8 ranks instantly, reaching level 78. It was a monstrous leap. Usually, grinding for a single level took ages. Yet this dragon gave. Aruto pulled his friends into a hug. He warned them urgently, if we pass out here exposed, we'll wake up in a monster's stomach by sunrise. Aruto slammed his hand down, summoning a fortress of stone walls. As consciousness faded, he entrusted their safety to Ru. Ru, the loyal spirit, saluted his master. Outside, the moon bathed the battlefield in a hauntingly beautiful glow. Darkness took them. When morning finally broke, the party awoke to a sight that defied all logic. Scorching heat radiated against their skin. A blinding crimson light pulsed before their eyes, the colossal magic stone of a dragon. Aruto turned to his familiar. Ru, did you drag this entire thing here by yourself? The weary slime bubbled a confirmation. Aruto was floored. You secured the loot while keeping guard. You are incredible. Ru. He hugged the spirit, who jiggled with pride. Majika stared at the gem, whispering that she had never seen mana shine with such vibrancy. Lion couldn't take his eyes off it. Is that truly the core of a dragon? The sheer beauty of the stone was hypnotic. Merely presenting this gem would be enough to prove to the world that they had slain a dragon. Aruto glanced at the mountain of meat behind them. The stone was just one piece. The real harvest was about to begin. Without hesitation, Aruto drew his blade and began carving into the dragon's leg. Lion gaped. "What are you doing?" "We aren't leaving a gold mine like this behind," Aruto replied. "Take these scales, for instance. If we sew these into clothing, we create armor that can deflect iron swords as if they were twigs. Its claws can be forged into blades that slice through steel. A cloak from its hide offers magic immunity." He then pointed to a glistening organ. "And this," Aruto said, identifying the rare component, "is the dragon's eyeball. This commands a fortune on the market." The party watched in silence as Aruto hoisted the massive eye. Then, with a manic glint in his eyes, Aruto revealed the ultimate prize. "I found it. The rarest material of all the dragons." Lying to faint on the spot, Majika grabbed Aruto by the collar, panicking as their tank hit the floor. Majika shook Aruto, demanding to know what made a dragon's heart so special. "It's an ingredient for a miracle," Aruto explained. "Process this for 3 years, and it transforms into an elixir of resurrection." Lion, waking up, clarified with a sigh. "Though it only works on humans, unfortunately." With the dismantling complete, Aruto ran the numbers. This haul was certainly enough to cover the cost of their uniforms. A wave of relief washed over him. He wouldn't have to worry about money for a very long time. He warned Majika not to blow her share, and she agreed. But now, a new problem arose: how to transport this mountain of valuable materials. Lion, now fully recovered, mused, "If only we had an inventory skill right now." Aruto froze, astonished by the mention of the word inventory. Lion struggled to describe it, comparing it to storing items in invisible cells, a concept likely from ancient games. "What is this logic?" he asked Aruto. "It shouldn't be possible. The ability to store infinite items is a power belonging to gods, not humans." Aruto sighed. "My bag is destroyed. We have to take what we can carry and come back for the rest." Suddenly, the slime nudged him. Aruto looked down. "What is it?" "Ru." Ru spat out Aruto's blood. Ru had pulled it from inside his own body. A crazy idea formed in Aruto's mind. He looked at the massive dragon stone, then at the tiny slime. "Ru, can you eat that too?" Ru merely opened his massive jaws and devoured every single on the ground, leaving Aruto and the others completely paralyzed. Lion, frantically clutching the slime, roared, "Inventory skills don't even exist in this world." At this realization, Aruto collapsed in despair, devastated that his careful selection of materials had been for nothing. While Aruto slumped on the ground, completely defeated, an unseen observer watched them from the shadows. The mysterious girl mused that only 3 individuals in history, and specifically that boy, had managed to slaughter an entire dragon. It seemed the prophecy of God had been correct after all. She smiled, eagerly anticipating the chaos the future would bring. Upon arriving at the hangout, demanding attention as he announced the completion of the impossible dragon slaying request, Lion stepped forward with confidence, inviting the skeptical guild members to inspect their hard-won loot. The evaluator sneered, remarking that while the materials were decent, they could easily have been bought at an auction rather than harvested from a kill. The guild staff turned cold, stating they would neither purchase the goods nor pay the reward, dismissing the group with a wave of their hands. Lion immediately slammed his hand down, countering that these were fresh materials, not goods intended for resale. Aruto, watching from the back, realized these physical proofs were meaningless. He reflected on the cruel nature of destiny, how each person's path is written in stone, and how impossible it is to change it. Such cognitive blind spots were not just ignorance, he realized, but the natural consequence for those who dare to defy their inherent fate, acting as a universal law of this magical world. Turning to Lion, Aruto sighed and apologized, stating they had no choice but to concede this battle. Lion stood there, bewildered and furious, unable to fathom why they should surrender when they had genuinely slain the beast. Yet, the guild remained stone-faced. Aruto whispered their true objective: they only needed enough coin for uniforms. They would find another way to sell the materials. Lion gritted his teeth, acknowledging the logic. Yet, his warrior's pride screamed against the humiliation of surrender. Suddenly, a sharp voice sliced through the air, chastising them for making such a racket in a place of business. Aruto looked up, and a cold wave of shock washed over him as his eyes met the speakers. The girl scoffed. "Even if corals are the main decoration here, Your noise is pollution. Did you guys know that? They stared, demanding to know the identity of this arrogant girl. She stood tall, introducing herself as Citri Justice, the future matriarch of the Duchy of Justice. Lion frowned, stating he didn't understand her noble babble, but firmly requested she stop meddling in their affairs. The girl retorted that he had asked for her name, and she had merely answered. She looked them up and down, asking, "What sort of barbarian adventurers are you?" Lion visibly trembled, struggling to suppress his rage, and demanded she clarify that insult. Aruto stepped in, urging Lion to stand down. He studied the girl intensely, the name echoing in his mind. He recognized her immediately, an official from the Council of True and False, one of Euphonia's 12 legendary generals. What in the world is a monster like her doing here? Aruto wondered, panic rising. Examining the items, the girl plucked a sample of spinal fluid. "This is fresh," she declared loudly. "Harvested mere days ago. It proves the dragon died recently." "It confirms they didn't just buy these at an auction," she stated, silencing the room with her authority. With Citri's word, the guild had no choice but to agree. The disbelief that he became a dragon slayer so young. "I can't wait to see what other surprises you've saved for the future," she whispered, while Aruto stood frozen, sweating under her gaze. As they left the guild, a delighted Lion clutched 150 gold coins, exclaiming he had never seen such wealth in his life. Majika, ever the pragmatist, quickly reminded him that they couldn't just spend it recklessly. Aruto walked silently behind them, his mind racing. Why had Citri spoken to him specifically? Had she seen through his disguise? He had spent over 10 years meticulously planning Hannah's rescue. His current lodging was the foundation of his entire operation. If he had known she would be there, would he have changed the plan? He shook his head, resolving that he would change nothing. To change course now would be a bluff he couldn't afford. There was nothing left but to proceed, convincing himself that everything was fine. So far, the plan held together. Aruto reassured himself, though his heart pounded. Meanwhile, Citri was sparring in the courtyard, her blade moving so fast it was a blur as she crushed her opponent. A footman approached, begging her to stop, noting she was far more energetic than usual. "Did something happen in the city, my lady?" he asked. She grinned, replying that she believed she had finally found her little man, and affirmed that God's prophecies were absolute. It was worth posting that impossible request for the dragon's extermination. The state is desperate to kill them at any cost. Though slaying a dragon is an impossible feat for a single person. Almost entirely unlikely. But if someone deviates from God's ordained fate, if someone appears who can kill a dragon, that little man will lead the world to ruin. A new singularity. She wasn't absolutely sure yet, but she couldn't ignore the signs. "When my eyes met that boy's, I saw the spirit of war," she mused, her thoughts locking onto Aruto. Citri knew the truth. Had he not walked the path of righteousness, such an indomitable spirit would never have awakened within him. A moment later, she parried her opponent's blow with elegant ease. "Watch closely, Lord Formus," she commanded. The time had come to unveil Aruto's true potential. Under the blazing morning sun, Aruto, Majika, and Lion arrived at the academy for the fateful class placements. Lion scanned the announcement board feverishly, searching for his destiny until he finally found it. Lion was stuck in Class C again. He stared at the exam scores next to his name, confusion clouding his mind. The merit system seemed broken. If these numbers are real, he thought, why am I still rotting in the second lowest rank? Majika smirked, suggesting Aruto's written scores must have been catastrophically bad. Aruto calmly asked, "And where did the high and mighty Majika end up?" "Class A," she declared, puffing out her chest. "Scholarship student." Lion's jaw dropped in disbelief, while Aruto smiled, offering congratulations with genuine warmth. Majika tilted her head. "Surely you're in Class A too, right, Aruto?" "Class D," Aruto replied without skipping a beat. The silence that followed was deafening. Lion collapsed to the ground, wailing in despair. "You prepared longer than anyone. How did you end up beneath me? Did you fill in the wrong bubbles on purpose?" Lion accused. Smack. Majika slapped him upside the head. "Shut up, you idiot. Show some respect." Aruto's expression didn't waver. I am of peasant blood. In this system, anything higher than Class D is a dream forbidden to my station. Besides, Aruto added, his eyes looking past them, this school life holds no weight for me. I don't care about the ranking. Everything is fine. His companion stood frozen, unable to comprehend his unnatural calm. The gates loomed ahead. Brief farewells. They parted ways, stepping toward their separate fates. Aruto hoped they would survive this place. He turned toward his own classroom. Again, if my memory serves me right, a water trap triggers the moment I touch this. The water crashed down. A student inside snickered. Oops, just practicing my water magic. My bad. The bully sneered, offering a fake apology. I didn't see the garbage of the poor peasants walking in. The mockery. The disdain from the nobles. It was a scene ripped straight from his past life's nightmares. Aruto understood instantly. Good luck with your practice, Aruto said coldly. History was repeating itself, exactly as written. The class fell silent. They stared at Aruto, bewildered. Why wasn't he soaking wet? The bully scowled at his friend. You have no control. Watch me do it. He stepped forward, mana flaring, and launched an attack at Aruto. Aruto didn't flinch, countered their magic with a subtle wave, shattering the spell. He remained completely dry. The attacker froze, his mind unable to process the impossible. How did a peasant repel a direct hit so easily? Aruto sat at his desk and opened his bag, unbothered. In my past life, he mused, that kind of reaction speed was merely survival. The bullies exchanged frantic glances. They concluded there was only one explanation. Aruto had stolen a high-grade magic artifact, flames in his hands. That last spell was dangerous, but if you have armor, you can handle fire, right? Aruto looked at them with pity. They weren't just bullying him. They were branding him a thief to justify their violence. He analyzed the situation. Am I really reckless enough to use offensive magic here? No. Their skills are pathetic anyway. Suddenly, the door swung open. Another student entered, unleashing a roar. Time seemed to stop. Aruto leaped from his seat, moving to intercept the attack before it could strike the innocent girl entering the room. He moved with blinding speed. He crushed the spell in midair, shocking the attacker. Even for practice, Aruto's voice turned icy. Attacking in class is foolish. What if someone got hurt? His aura flared, terrifying the student. Next time, be more attentive. The attacker trembled, paralyzed by the killing intent radiating from this peasant. Who was this monster? What? What is going on? A soft voice asked. Aruto stiffened. He knew that voice. It was the reunion he had dreaded and desired for so long. He turned slowly. Standing there, bathed in the morning light, was Hana. Aruto masked his trembling hands and approached her. Just some magic practice gone wrong. He lied smoothly. Everything is fine. Don't worry. But inside, his soul was weeping. The pain of seeing her again was a weight he could barely sustain. He could not drag her into his abyss again. He had only 5 years of life remaining. If they rekindled their love, he would only leave her behind. He had to be a stranger. He had to break his own heart to save hers. She dies in 4 months. The thought echoed in his mind. Aruto walked out of the classroom, whispering to himself that it was for the best, but his resolve shattered instantly. In his mind, a vow forged in blood rang out, I will defy fate. I will protect you, Hana. Hana stood rooted to the spot, watching his retreating back. Seeing him here, it was a miracle she had never dared to pray for. The colonel stood as pillars of the Euphonian kingdom, an ancient and noble bloodline. As the family's golden child, the weight of the world rested on her young shoulders. They sought out a legendary grandmaster to unlock her potential, but fate was cruel. She remained stagnant, unable to grasp even the simplest concepts. The grandmaster stood before her parents, shaking his head in disbelief. In all his years, he had never witnessed a soul so completely void of aptitude. Little Hana hid in the shadows, her heart pounding as she eavesdropped. The master explained that talent wasn't just a skill, it was the very essence of a warrior's soul. The monocrystal didn't lie. Her innate potential was fixed at a pitiful level 4. With such a meager foundation, greatness was impossible. She could never build a tower on sinking sand. Though it pained him, the master delivered the crushing verdict, your daughter is empty. 10 long, agonizing years have passed since that day. The prophecy of failure held true. No matter how much blood and sweat she sacrificed, she remained stuck, unable to ascend a single rank. Abandoned by her clan, even cast aside by her own father, she was alone. Yet, Hannah refused to break, using political leverage to force her way into the academy. The academy accepted her, but only out of fear. They could not allow the prestigious colonel name to be tarnished by a public scandal. Hannah adopted a survival strategy of absolute invisibility. She would become a ghost within these walls. She would hold her breath to avoid attention and seal her lips to remain unknown, erasing her own presence the moment she stepped into that classroom. The gears of fate began to turn. A distant memory surfaced, her mother's voice, speaking of a destined bond. Though the face was unknown, her mother promised one thing when their souls met. Her heart would instantly recognize him. It was written in the stars, and there he was. The moment her eyes landed on Aruto, time stopped. She knew, without a shadow of a doubt, it was the one. On the grounds, Aruto stood with his blade. The instructor barked orders, demanding they wield their steel with killing intent, as if facing real demons. Precision is everything, the instructor roared. Swing with purpose, or get out of my class. I have no patience for children playing games. His voice was cold, but his intent was lethal. As Aruto drew his dagger, the instructor launched a surprise assault. Aruto sidestepped the blow effortlessly, eyes narrowing. What is the meaning of this? The teacher extended a greedy hand. Hand over the weapon. A novice like you is unworthy of such a blade. It wasn't just a knife. It was a dragon fang dagger, a legendary artifact forged from the incisors of a true beast. The teacher's eyes gleamed with avarice. Aruto scoffed internally. He had crafted this himself after slaughtering a dragon, but telling the truth would only sound like the ramblings of a madman. You rely too much on the tool. The teacher sneered. You will never reach true mastery if the weapon carries you. I'll be confiscating this until your skills are worthy, he commanded, stepping closer. Now, give it here. Immediately. Whispers erupted among the students. That was Levante, a high-class adventurer against such a veteran. Aruto was merely an ant. Aruto didn't flinch. Levante, taking the silence for defiance, struck again. Too slow, he mocked. Why haven't you surrendered it yet? But Aruto flowed like water, weaving through the strikes. He would not yield his prize so easily. Analyze the movements. Levante wasn't just talk. His technique bore the weight of a true high-class warrior. Levante frowned. How was a commoner dodging him? It had to be a fluke, pure dumb luck. Let's play a game of tag. Aruto's mind raced, calculating the odds. If you can survive until the bell without a scratch, the dagger stays with you. Aruto couldn't fathom why an instructor would be so desperate for a student's weapon, but it was clear Levante had no intention of letting him walk away. Levante cracked his knuckles, his aura flaring. Refuse, and you lose by default, peasant. There was no escape. The hunt was on. With a roar, Levante exploded forward. Aruto danced around the blows. For a man of such bulk, the teacher moved with terrifying velocity. Yet, to Aruto's eyes, this was child's play. Compared to the monster known as Majika, Levante was nothing. Inside, Levante was reeling. How was the boy evading every hit? It defies logic. It must be a miracle of chance. Enough games Levante cast a high-tier wind spell, cornering his prey. He grinned, certain of his victory. Crash. The magic pulverized the wall, but struck nothing else. Levante's eyes widened. The boy was gone. Aruto materialized behind him, a cold sweat on his brow. That was close. The teacher was actually trying to maim him with offensive spells. The class erupted in cheers, thirsting for violence, but amidst the noise, Hannah stood frozen, watching in silence. Her eyes were locked on Aruto, burning with anticipation. She saw what the others missed. As the barrage continued, Aruto sighed. He had no choice. To survive this maniac, he would have to unleash the distance reduction art. Flash, in a blur of motion, his body deconstructed and reformed instantly atop a nearby tree. It was a technique he had only just mastered, a divine footwork that allowed him to fold space and traverse the battlefield in the blink of an eye. Levante gnashed his teeth in frustration, his attacks hitting nothing but air. How could a mere student remain so elusive? At this rate, humiliation was inevitable. Just then, Aruto descended, settling onto a tree branch with the grace of a phantom. The teacher's eyes gleamed with malice. Do you truly believe you escaped unscathed? He pointed a trembling finger at Aruto's hem. It was impossible. Aruto gasped internally. He was that fast, I didn't even sense the blade tearing my clothes. Victory is mine, the instructor declared. But Aruto, staring at the torn fabric, felt his mind race. He had been analyzing every micro movement, and teacher Levante definitely hadn't made physical contact. It's the wind, Aruto deduced, his eyes narrowing. He is manipulating the air itself. Levante smirked. He knew the boy was sharp enough to catch on. Yet, a sycophantic student cried out, I saw it. The teacher definitely touched him. I saw it too. Another chimed in, a nearby. Hannah narrowed her eyes in disgust. Liars, she thought. At that speed, human eyes see nothing but a blur. Aruto felt the pressure mounting. The situation was dire. This wasn't simple evasion anymore. It was a deadly trap involving invisible range. Levante extended a greedy hand, his voice dripping with entitlement. Hand over the dragon's fang, as per our wager. Hold it right there. A voice cut through the tension. The teacher never touched him. It was Majika, declaring she had witnessed every frame of the duel. Aruto hopped down from the tree, confusion written on his face. Majika, what are you doing here? Just passing by, she replied casually, before her expression turned icy. She turned her cold gaze to Levante. Is this man truly qualified to be a teacher? Levante froze. He recognized that aura immediately. Majika was a walking disaster, a state-level threat. Arguing with her was a death sentence. Very well, he conceded, forcing a smile. If a student with her unique vision says so, it must be true. He turned back to Aruto, his eyes promising pain. He leaned in, whispering a venomous warning. This is just a game, but if you lose, the consequences will be severe, especially with her watching. Let us reset, Levante roared, masking his fury. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. Witness the power of an A-rank adventurer windcutter. This advanced art infuses magic into my very hands, turning them into lethal weapons. He sneered. Let's see you dodge this, boy. In a flash, Levante lunged. He believed he had the boy trapped like a rat in a cage. This magic didn't just increase his range. It summoned a storm of invisible wind blades to shred the opponent from all angles. Levante's eyes darkened with murderous intent. He is just a student, he reasoned. If he dies here, it will simply be a tragic training accident. He willed his attack to cleave Aruto in two, Aruto's focus sharpened to a razor's edge. He could feel the stinging lethality of the wind blades. I cannot take a single hit, he resolved. With godlike reflexes, Aruto... The teacher gasped, his mind reeling. Impossible. A weakling at the first level of life shouldn't be able to move like that. Yet, doubt gnawed at his pride. Can someone truly defy the hierarchy of ranks? He shook his head violently. No, it must be a fluke, an accident. I must be off my game today. Levante tried to reassure himself, but desperation took over. He drew his live steel sword. As an instructor of this academy, defeat was unacceptable. With a roar, he charged directly at the boy, the blade thirsting for blood. Aruto's eyes went wide. A real sword, is he insane? The situation had escalated from a spar to a fight for survival. The lesson is almost over. Aruto calculated, watching the clock. If I can just survive this fight, victory is mine. But suddenly, the mob turned on him. How is he dodging? The other students grumbled, jealous of his skill. He must be cheating play fair like a man. In a despicable move, the student lunged, grabbing Aruto's legs to pin him down. We've got him. Attack now, teacher. Blindsided by the betrayal, Aruto stood helpless as Levante crowd, but Hannah felt a chill run down her spine. Is the teacher actually going to execute him? Levante sneered internally. Die, you filth. I can easily extinguish the life of a small fry like you. I will not lose. The blade descended, a silent command for Aruto to die, but with mere seconds remaining. Clang. The sword was ripped from Levante's grip as if by a ghost. The teacher stared at his empty hand in absolute... What just happened? Before he could blink, Aruto activated distance reduction. He warped instantly to a new location, dragging the treacherous students along with him. He didn't stop there. Activate gravity field and aggro redirection. The trap snapped shut. The teacher collapsed, completely outplayed. Aruto stood tall, his voice cold. You are unfit to teach, blinded by greed and vanity. He dropped the ball beside the defeated man with a heavy thud. Beep! The final seconds ticked away. The lesson was over. Aruto had won. The traitors, still clutching Aruto's legs, stared gap-mouthed at their fallen idol. Class dismissed, Aruto stated flatly, and slowly slipped away from his boots. Yet, mere moments later, the delusion returned. The students buzzed with excitement. Did you see Teacher Levante's moves? So cool. We could never move like that. He's a legend. Shadow in the background. They've already forgotten who actually won, he mused. The pervasive magic of this world twists even their memories and common sense. Whack. Sudden impact hit him from behind. It was Majika, pouting. You're so inattentive, she scolded. Aruto rubbed his head, baffled. She says I'm confused by a stab in the back, he sighed. Truly, she is the most unpredictable one here. As a penalty for his actions, he was sentenced to join her for mandatory after-school training. Dejected, Aruto mumbled about his plans to sharpen his blacksmithing skills that day. He tried to bluff, claiming he hadn't lost the dagger and that Majika should just drop it, but she stood her ground. In the background, Hannah stood like a silent statue, watching every move. Later, as twilight saw her dance, but her mind wandered, consumed by thoughts of Aruto. Why was the world so blind to his brilliance? The instructor was a master, yes, but to her eyes, Aruto's movements seemed to transcend even the teacher's skill. Was she the only one seeing this? The masses were oblivious, but she saw the truth. Aruto sometimes fought with his eyes closed. How could a mere level 1 possess such godlike instincts? Hannah, a level 4 elite, felt infinitely small. She felt she could never replicate Aruto's mastery. Convinced, she shook her head violently, scattering the dark thoughts. Natural talent couldn't be everything. Effort had to count for something. Aruto surely trained until his bones ached. Gripping her hilt tight, the girl swore a silent oath. If she poured her very soul into this, she could reach those heights too. Clang. The sword slipped from her grasp. A grimace twisted her arms. Her palms were a raw mess of bruises. Tears threatened to spill, but she held them back. She had to get stronger. Not for recognition, but for her own pride. Suddenly, the training hall doors creaked open. Aruto walked in, nearly colliding with Hannah. Panic flashed across his face. He stammered an apology, claiming he thought the room was empty. He asked for a moment of his time. Aruto pretended to be deaf, his gaze fixed obstinately on the exit, but she persisted, her voice cutting through his act. Hannah sat on the cold floor, formally introducing herself as Hannah Colonel. She cut straight to the chase. Aruto's skills were abnormal. No ordinary student could dodge Teacher Levante like a phantom. Her eyes bore into him. How had he attained such monstrous strength? Aruto froze by the door, a war raging in his heart. The clock was ticking. Only 5 years remained before the end. Getting close to her now was cruel. He told himself, it will only leave her shattered when I'm gone. He resolved to watch over her from the shadows. Nothing more. Without turning back, Aruto lied coldly, claiming his strength came from simple training, but then Hannah snatched her hand back as if burned, stammering apologies for her boldness. Why had she touched him like that? Aruto looked down at her, and his icy resolve melted. A gentle smile graced his lips. She hadn't changed at all. She was exactly the girl he remembered from the past timeline. Hannah's voice pulled him back to reality. She swallowed her pride. If it isn't too much trouble, would you train with me? Desperation laced her words. No matter how much she bled and sweated, she was stuck. Even with elite teachers, she was running in place. She made no progress, constantly falling behind the pack. She looked up at him with pleading eyes. I just feel, if you teach me, everything will finally work out. She apologized again for the Aruto stood silent, absorbing every word of her anxiety. His eyes fell on her hands, battered, scarred, and covered in wounds. A pang of guilt hit him. The chance to connect with her was slipping through his fingers. Logic told him to leave. Emotion screamed for him to stay. In the end, he was powerless to refuse. He couldn't reject the earnest heart of someone so diligent, someone he had cherished in a past life. "If that is your wish," Aruto said softly, "I will lend you my strength." All of it. Hannah's face lit up like the morning sun. She extended her hand, and they sealed the pact with a shake. "Everything I have," she vowed. Aruto smiled back. "You must. That is the only way." "Fantastic. We'll all try our best." Suddenly, voices echoed from the shadows, claiming they heard everything. Hannah looked up, bewildered and startled. Lion stepped forth, declaring, "Friends of friends are friends, too." Behind him, a smaller girl peeked out. He announced his grand scheme, Operation 100 Friends. With zero hesitation, he thrust his hand toward Hannah for a greeting. "I'm Lion. Can I call you Hannah?" Caught off guard by his energy, Hannah simply nodded. "Yes, of course." Aruto frowned. His moment ruined. Friends of friends. What kind of logic is that? We aren't even friends. Lion clutched his chest, dramatically wounded by the rejection. Aruto sighed, forced to calm the chaotic boy down. Then, the girl stepped forward. Majika, estate terror. She introduced herself with aristocratic grace. "Just Majika is fine." She offered her hand. Hannah blinked, noting the three-part name. "Are you from a royal lineage?" Majika nodded calmly. "Yes, a former royal family. The squirrel family has lost its crown," she explained. "Our bloodline is ancient, but our power has faded." Lion and Aruto listened, stunned by the revelation. Lion couldn't hold it back. "What? Why am I hearing this now?" Majika shrugged, matter-of-factly. "It was obvious, and you never asked." Lion practically exploded. "If you're truly royalty, then my rare heroic talents look like trash in comparison." He stared at the petite girl in disbelief. "I thought she was just the quiet type. How can someone so tiny be of royal blood?" And just like that, the chaotic bickering began. The quiet training hall had become a battlefield of words. As Aruto and Hannah observed the skirmish from the sidelines, Hannah turned to her leader, trembling as she asked if they should intervene. Aruto, however, remained calm, reassuring her that Lion possessed monstrous strength and would be perfectly fine. It was hard to believe that once, he couldn't even scratch a single demon. But now power coursed through him, granting him the strength to stand toe-to-toe with even a mage of Majika's caliber. Aruto looked not. She would definitely become stronger. A few days later, just outside the borders of Euphonia, the party ventured deep into the forest, introducing Hannah every obstacle as a united front. Every so often, Aruto would offer Hannah a helping hand. That was when Majika, with a curious glint in her eyes, asked the dreaded question regarding Hannah's level. The girl hesitated before revealing the hard zero talent, leaving her unable to. Silence fell as Majika and Lion stared in disbelief, asking if she was joking. How can a player possess absolutely no innate scolded Lion for his insensitivity? But then, Lion wiped his eyes and declared that her condition was actually magnetic. Lion clarified his stance with surprising wisdom. While a gift or talent accelerates growth, it also acts as a chain, dictating the only path a warrior can take. Lacking such a gift meant Hannah wasn't bound by fate. She was free to forge her own legendary path. "Isn't that absolute freedom?" he asked. The words struck Aruto like lightning. Lion is right. Hannah had never heard such a beautiful interpretation of her curse before. Aruto remarked that it was a brilliant perspective. He honestly couldn't believe such profound wisdom had come from Lion's mouth. Majika bluntly confessed that she had always assumed Lion was just a muscle-brained idiot. Everyone stared blankly at the tank, who indignantly asked why their opinion of him was so agonizingly low. Eventually, they arrived at a tranquil lake, deciding it was the perfect stage for their training. Hannah, eager but naive, suggested practicing her swings on the trees. Aruto shook his head, his expression hardening as he explained that this would be a simulation of real combat. From this moment on, Hannah would be facing real, breathing monsters, leaving her stunned. She stared at Aruto in horror, declaring that it was impossible. She didn't just suddenly take a life. She reminded him desperately that her skills were only level 1. Had he forgotten her status, all three veterans fixed their gaze on the trembling rookie. She reiterated that, without experience, defeating a monster was a death sentence. Aruto reached into his inventory, his calm demeanor acting as a shield against her panic. "Everything will be fine," he promised softly. "I won't let a single scratch appear on you." But just then, a horde of goblins materialized from the shadows. Lion protested, shouting that Aruto was throwing her into the deep end too casually. Majika added dryly that perhaps luring an entire army of goblins was a bit excessive. Aruto simply smirked, announcing that he had a plan. He turned to his companions, motioning for them to lean in as he whispered the details of his strategy. Their eyes lit up with immediate understanding. "That plan is truly worthy of a master tactician," Lion replied, grinning. Both Majika and Lion felt their fighting spirits ignite, ready for the slaughter. Aruto then pressed a sword into Hana's shaking hands, announcing that the lesson was beginning. Hana, pale as a sheet, admitted she wasn't ready to kill. Aruto expressed his absolute trust in his party, and together they charged into the fray. Majika moved like the wind, skillfully dodging the goblins' crude attacks. She leaped into the air, realizing that picking them off one by one was inefficient. She unleashed a devastating area of effect spell, knowing her mana was more than sufficient to crush these low-level pests. This was Majika's signature-style maximum destruction with minimum effort. Meanwhile, Aruto activated a luminous stone, the light blinding their foes as he joined the assault. Suddenly, a goblin lunged from the bushes. Panic seized her as she realized she was completely defenseless. But Aruto was already there. He shielded her instantly, closing the distance in a flash of speed, determined to keep his promise of safety. After dispatching the creature effortlessly, Aruto turned to Hana, asking if she was unhurt. She nodded, terrified but safe. Aruto's eyes narrowed. The moment of truth had arrived. Suddenly, he let out a dramatic scream as he was swarmed by goblins, shouting that he had let his guard down and was surely doomed. Hana saw the invincible lion buried under a pile of writhing monsters and screamed for help. She turned to Aruto, exclaiming that their friend was in mortal danger. Aruto, casually swatting away a goblin, apologized and claimed his hands were full, then calmly ordered Hana to be the one to save him. Hana froze, protesting that she was too weak, but Aruto's voice cut through the chaos, assuring her that everything would be fine if she moved now. The monster's aggro was focused entirely on Lion, giving Hana a perfect opening to strike from the blind spot, but she was paralyzed by crippling self-doubt. Aruto watched with intensity, believing that everything was proceeding exactly according to his script. Aruto's strategy hinged entirely on Lion's unique build, his exceptional taunting skills, monstrous physical defense, and his literal immortality. These traits allowed Lion to remain the goblin's punching bag indefinitely without dying. With Lion tanking the damage, Hana simply needed to step up and land a hit. Once she broke that mental barrier, she and Majika could easily clean up the stragglers. The critical question remained. Did Hana possess the courage to draw blood? Hana clutched her sword until her knuckles turned white, her heart pounding in her ears. But if she didn't act, Lion would die, resolved to save her friend. She recalled her training and slashed at a goblin from behind, inflicting a shallow wound. Tears welled in her eyes as the blade. The psychological damage to Hana's innocence was far greater. Aruto watched silently as Hana stood trembling, the weight of her first battle crashing down upon her. The image of her friend falling in battle burned in her memory, and she cursed her trembling hands, drowning in a sea of self-hatred for her own powerlessness. Suddenly, he roared out to her, assuring her that she possessed the strength to overcome this nightmare. His absolute confidence ignited a fire within her. Hana gripped her blade until her knuckles turned white, steel determination flooding her veins. She felt invincible. She needed to find her true courage. With a battle cry, Hana launched herself at the goblin horde. Her blade carved a path forward, but Majika was faster than a shadow. "Know your place," projectile, and sending it flying back with double the killing intent. Hana didn't stop. One foe fell, then another. With every strike, the world suddenly spun. Hana stumbled, vision blurring. Aruto's voice trembled with worry. "Are you all right?" I'm sorry," she stammered, clutching her head as the dizziness washed over her. "Everything is just... You leveled up." Pure euphoria exploded in her chest as the realization hit her she had finally broken through. The dam broke. Tears streamed down her face as she buried herself in Aruto's shoulder. 15 moment. But the touching scene was shattered by a grumpy voice. "Hey, how long are you going to leave me buried under this mountain of goblin corpses?" Lion groaned from the pile. Aruto blinked, realizing he had completely forgotten their tank. Hana wiped her tears, baffled. How is he staying so calm under there? Despite bleeding and being crushed, Lion smirked with unwavering arrogance. I am a warrior of courage. Did you really think these small fry could scratch me? Aruto chuckled, revealing the truth. We let you take the lead to awaken your bravery. The pieces of the puzzle clicked together in Hana's mind instantly. She gently pulled away from Aruto, face flushed, as he suggested they take a breather until her racing heart settled down. No. Aruto smiled, seeing the warrior she was becoming. He signaled his slime, Ru, to fetch a specific item. Aruto then presented a magnificent blade to Hana, a weapon forged from the remains of an ancient dragon. Dragon bone, forged with my own hands. Aruto explained, I made this specifically for you, tailored to your family's blacksmithing heritage. As her fingers wrapped around the hilt, Hana felt a soul-deep resonance. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a masterpiece of destruction. A new wave of screeched behind her, without hesitation, the dragon blade flashing like a streak of lightning. The monster shock, a simple flick of the wrist had unleashed a storm of kinetic force. This power, she gasped, trembling. It's too much. How can someone like me wield a sword like this? Aruto shook his head. A legendary tool guides its master. That sword isn't just a weapon. Hana, it is a teacher meant to unlock your true potential. He looked deep into her eyes. You have the strength, you just need to believe in it. Hana nodded, her grip on the dragon bone tightening. Watching her growth, Majika and Lion couldn't help but smile with pride. The training isn't over, Aruto announced. We're going to power level you now. We will ramp up the difficulty until you are truly unstoppable. Moments later, steel clashed against flesh as Hana threw herself back into the fray. Aruto rushed to her side, checking for wounds. Good work. Are you hurt anywhere? Forget that. Check your status window, he urged. Hana opened her interface, eyes widening in shock as she asked Aruto to look. Aruto froze. At level 31, a legendary unique talent had awakened. It was unmistakably the seed of a hero. Stunned by the text floating in the air, Aruto turned to their tank, Lion, in all your travels. Have you ever seen a talent like Seed of a Hero? Lion's usual arrogance was gone. I was about to ask you the same thing. This is unheard of. But from the shadows, Majika's eyes locked onto those words. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. Hana was the one she had spent a lifetime searching for. The fate of this world rested in the hands of 6 deities: Largo, the god of war, the divine blacksmith. There was Nis, Ormus, the lord of order and justice, the patron god of the squirrel tribe. And finally, Amano Aloha, the lord of nature, Majika, the royal princess of the squirrel tribe, was born from a prophecy whispered by Amano Aloha himself. The oracle had spoken clearly. By the side of the hero, she shall reshape the very foundations of this world. Majika's sacred duty was to locate the bearer of the hero's gift and serve as their blade. After 7 long years of traveling with Aruto, the search was finally over. Hana's potential had been stifled until now, a curse likely placed by the machinations of the god Formus himself. The Church of Formus was no mere religion, it was a global superpower with the largest following in history. Even here in the kingdom of Euphonia, his influence was absolute. Under the beautiful mask of justice and order, he ruthlessly purged anyone who threatened his dominion. That was why Hana's world-altering talent had been sealed away in the dark all this time. A true hero was the only threat to Formus's absolute rule. Watching Hana, Majika realized the impossible. Aruto hadn't just trained a girl, he had shattered a seal placed by a god. Now, the real challenge began. Could they awaken the dormant power? Sleepily, Aruto's voice pierced the silence, asking Majika for her insight. But the mage seemed lost in the labyrinth of her own mind. Majika dismissed his concern with a wave. Deep down, she knew the truth, revealing the weight of Hana's heroic gift now would only crush the girl's spirit. The time was not yet right. Just then, Hana turned to them, the first light of dawn illuminating her apology. We must return, she urged. Her heart was heavy with worry for her anxious butler. Understanding the delicate situation, Aruto nodded in agreement. She had already surpassed her limits, leveling up far beyond expectations. Yet, hesitating, Hana turned to Aruto with one final plea. "What is it?" he asked, flushing with embarrassment. Hana's voice grew quiet. "Could you accompany me home?" She needed a shield against the questions awaiting her return. Memories of his previous life flashed before Aruto's eyes the last time he stood before her gates. In that timeline, he had wounded her, igniting the butler's unquenchable fury. He realized instantly this time he had to be there. Turning to his companions, Aruto issued a command. "Majika, Lion, head to the guild first. Dispose of the monastones." Standing before the Colonel estate, the sheer grandeur of the mansion took their breath away. To Aruto, it was a masterpiece he could admire for eternity. "Are you surprised?" Hana asked softly. She explained that the first head of House Colonel was a legendary founder of the Euphonia kingdom itself. The massive gates groaned open, welcoming them into the belly of the aristocratic beast. As they walked down a corridor lined with judgmental portraits, Hana recounted the weight of her lineage. Every ancestor was a titan of history, shaping the nation with their brilliance. "And you?" Aruto asked. "Will you walk that same path?" She nodded solemnly. Her lack of talent was not just a weakness, it was a stain on a monumental legacy. Aruto offered no empty comfort, only silence. Stepped into a lavish parlor. "Please wait here," Hana requested, promising a swift return. Aruto obliged, sinking into the plush sofa. As Hana's footsteps faded, "You can come out now," he announced to the empty room. "Butler?" Like a phantom materializing from the shadows, the man appeared. Though shocked at being detected, he bowed with practiced grace. "I am Klein, head butler of the Colonel household," he continued, his eyes assessing the guest. "And I presume you are the one called Aruto." Aruto smirked. "Since you were lurking in the shadows, I assume you desire a private conversation." Sharp, Klein had dispensed with pleasantries and cut straight to the heart of the matter. "What is your objective with 30 other promising students available? Why did you choose my lady Hana?" Aruto knew the stakes. The Colonel name was synonymous with the peak of nobility. Feigning coincidence would be futile. To this man, Aruto was nothing but a lowly peasant scraping at the door of aristocracy. He chose the path of honesty. "Despite the gap in our status, we share a mutual understanding." Aruto replied steadily. "We both know the bitter taste of hitting rock bottom," he continued. "We know what it means to struggle like beggars for a scrap of hope." Klein's gaze bored into him. "Similar circumstances," the butler mused. "It must be a heavy burden for you to bear." The butler's expression softened momentarily. "However, Lady Hana smiles more these days, and I cannot deny that is your doing. For that, I thank you." As he poured tea with elegant precision, Klein prepared his final test. "One last question. What future do you see with my lady? What kind of relationship do you seek?" Aruto stared at the steaming cup, memories of a tragic past flooding his mind. "I hope," he said softly, "that we can become true friends." Silence filled the room. Crash. Klein swept the mug off the table, shattering the porcelain. "Impossible," he roared. "You are nothing but a filth-stained peasant." In a blur of motion, cold steel pressed against Aruto's throat. The blade dug into his skin. "For a rat to dream of befriending a noble." "It is an insult," the butler hissed. "I forbid you. Do not dare to approach Lady Hana again. Do you understand?" Aruto did not flinch. His eyes locked onto the butler, analyzing the unnatural, jagged fracture in the man's personality. It was exactly like the past. The moment he had brought harm to Hana in the previous life, this same demonic rage had erupted. This wasn't natural anger. An invisible puppet master was twisting Klein's emotions, trying to drag Aruto back into the abyss. It was the curse of the loop, the insidious magic of Formus, seeking to lock him into the same tragic destiny. If he stayed silent, the cycle would repeat. To save her, to save himself. He had to shatter this fate right now. Aruto kicked split second. "Why?" he demanded. "Why is my connection to her forbidden?" The butler spat his reply. "Do you not understand? A noble lady is tainted by the mere presence of a commoner, especially one who dares to think himself her equal." Aruto's eyes narrowed. The only one lacking dignity here was the man blindly following a cursed script. He knew the truth. Hana had evolved. She wasn't weak anymore. She was a warrior ready to dominate the D-class rankings. What had Klein actually accomplished sake over the last 15 years? The butler vehemently rejected the accusation, but Aruto cut him down with the cold, hard truth. Hana had stagnated at level 1 for an eternity, and Clean had merely watched from the sidelines, never lifting a finger to spark her evolution. "Is this what you call dignity?" Aruto thundered, snatching the blade right out of the butler's trembling grip. He didn't stop there. His senses pierced through the shadows, exposing 5 other assassins lurking within the room under the cloak of stealth skills. With a casual toss, Aruto revealed a handful of confiscated daggers. "This one seems to be your elite," he scoffed, his eyes cold as ice. "But if a mere child like me could disarm them without breaking a sweat, then their so-called mastery is laughably pathetic." The threat hung heavy in the air. What would happen if a real enemy struck and chaos ensued? Aruto stared daggers at Clean. "Does your noble pride really blind you to weakness?" The butler froze, questioning the terrifying intent behind the boy's eyes. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and Hana stepped in, innocent and offering a tour of the palace, morphed into a gentle smile. "Oh, nothing. The butler and I were just bonding." Forced to play along, the butler bowed stiffly. "Indeed, since I know Lady Hana, it is only natural I introduce myself to her guest. I look forward to our next lesson," Aruto said, his voice laced with hidden meaning. The butler bowed low, echoing the sentiment through gritted teeth. Leaving the suffocating room behind, they ventured deeper into the palace halls. Trailing behind her, Aruto's mind darkened. His assault on the staff was a crime, yes, but fear was the only teacher they would respect. The memories of his past life clawed at him. The day they were slaughtered by Sagan. That unstoppable monster who appeared like a calamity without warning. If only they had been ready. If they had built an iron defense. Destiny might not have ended in blood and despair. We were the only ones who could have survived that hell. Aruto realized, the weight of the timeline crushing him. Ahead, Hana turned, trying to catch his eye. Lost in the abyss of his memories, Aruto muttered, "Apologize." Hana opened a door, noticing the haunted look on his face. "You seem a million miles away," she whispered. They stepped into sanctuary. Hana's room was bathed in light. Every arranged a stark contrast to Aruto's dark thoughts. Aruto paused. This was the first time he had ever set foot in her private world. In the previous timeline, the living room had been his absolute boundary. So this was her bedroom all along, he thought, stunned. Hana confirmed it with a nod, amused by his reaction. She explained with a shy smile that nobles only invited their most cherished inner circle into these chambers. She wanted to show him her true gratitude. She turned to him, her eyes shimmering with sincere thanks for everything he had done. But Aruto shook his head firmly. "Your strength belongs to you alone. I was merely a guide." Her heart pounding. If Aruto doesn't mind... Lightning. In his past life, this was the moment she confessed her love. He couldn't let it happen. Not again. Accepting her heart meant binding their fates, dreaming of a future that would only lead to the same bloody tragedy. To reject her. He had to. Face burning red, Hana finally blurted it out. "Will you be my best friend?" Aruto froze, his brain short-circuiting. He stood there, completely blindsided by the innocent question. His face exploded with heat. "I'm an idiot," he screamed internally. "I actually thought she was confessing. What is wrong with my ego?" Shame washed over him, seeing his flushed face, seat, and her hand in comfort. Recovering his composure, Hana beamed, pure joy radiating from her. She giggled softly, teasing that while he wasn't her boyfriend yet, there was no need to rush destiny. Now, they had all the time in the world. Moment ended, and she thanked him for a day she would never forget. As Aruto turned to leave, apologizing for overstaying, a glimmer caught his eye, a sword resting quietly beside a glass display. He stepped closer, drawn by an invisible force. Hana noticed his intense gaze fixed on the weapon. "That blade is forged from orachalin," Hana explained, her voice dropping to a reverent whisper. "A relic from the War of the Gods, made for the first head of our house." Aruto's eyes widened. So this was the legendary metal. Orachalin. He could feel its aura pulsing. Hana revealed the tragic truth: it was a family heirloom, yet no living soul could wield it. Aruto frowned. It didn't look heavy physically. When he asked why, Hannah's expression turned solemn regarding the ancient restrictions. She explained that a divine will resided within the steel, intended only to fight for what is truly important in this world. However, after the first ancestor helped found the kingdom, the blade rejected him. It became a dormant artifact, refusing to be drawn. Aruto stared into the steel, a profound realization dawning on him. Perhaps, he mused, it is because one cannot truly protect one's own people while fighting for the greed of others. Still, Hannah turned to him, her eyes searching his for any sign of hesitation. Are you absolutely certain you won't stay for dinner? Though the offer warmed his heart, Aruto had to refuse. It wouldn't be proper for a commoner like me to linger here all night, he explained gently. She nodded, accepting the harsh reality of their worlds. He apologized for the abrupt departure, but offered a promise. I'll see you tomorrow at the academy. Then, he looked her in the eyes and made a solemn vow. From this day forward, we are best friends forever. But as Aruto walked away, a shadow fell over his heart. He knew the terrifying truth that tomorrow they hoped for might never dawn. He only prayed that no matter what tragedy unfolded, Hannah would remember he existed. Silently, she watched his figure fade into the distance. Aruto checked the invisible clock ticking in his mind. Hannah's death was only 7 hours away. Returning to his hideout, a familiar slime greeted him. Stepping inside, he announced his return and asked about their harvest. Did the goblins sell the magic stones? In response, the slime promptly regurgitated a mountain of gold coins. Aruto surveyed the wealth with a serious expression. You'll need to instruct the others, he commanded solemnly. Make sure these coins find their way to Hannah. The slime paused, its gelatinous body quivering in confusion, as if sensing the heavy gravity of his request. Go stay in Lion or Magic's room tonight, Aruto rested softly. I have personal matters to settle. He added a quiet request to send his regards. Hesitated, unsure if the creature was protesting, as the little slime climbed onto him. Guilt-struck, he hadn't spent nearly enough time with his companion lately. Smiling sadly, Aruto pulled Rue into a warm embrace. Later, once the creature had drifted into slumber and darkness swallowed the world, Aruto stood vigil by the window. He knew the enemy's path. Soon, Sumijin would tread this very road, marching toward the Colonel family estate. Aruto intended to cut him off right here. This room wasn't chosen by chance. It was the perfect window. Doubt creeping in. With his current stats, could he truly defeat a monster like Sumijin, or would he be helpless once again? In his past life, such weakness was unimaginable, but he couldn't afford hesitation now. The time for doubt had passed. He had wagered his entire existence on this single day. Now, only one path remained to fight with every fiber of his being. No matter the cost, Aruto vowed to crush Sumijin and avenge the agony of his previous life. But suddenly, a dark pall hung over the capital. It was impossible to tell from a distance if the city was consumed by ordinary fire or the flames of a demonic attack. From a high rooftop, Aruto scanned the horizon and his blood ran cold. The Colonel Mansion, near the royal castle, was engulfed in an inferno. The silence screamed that everyone inside was already gone. He threw himself toward the blazing structure, mind racing to process the disaster. One thought consumed him. Was Hannah safe? As he neared the ruins, Aruto spotted a menacing figure. Standing defiant against this stranger was the loyal butler, shielding Hannah and her mother with his life. The stranger looked down at them coldly. Perhaps now, you finally understand the reality of your situation. A sphere of destructive energy crackled in his hand. At this very moment, the man declared, Hannah Colonel is sentenced to death by the will of the ruler. The butler gasped. How is this possible? That Sumijin himself, one of Euphonia's 12 generals, would stoop to such an act? The man retorted with chilling arrogance. The 12 generals are the law. We are the jagged blade that ensures the nation's survival. This is a direct command. Every action I take tonight is sanctioned by absolute justice. He sneered at the old servant. Do you truly believe a mere butler has the right to interfere to stand between judgment and these women? The butler sought her daughter's life. Turning to protect his young mistress, the butler roared, How can there be a decree to murder a 15-year-old girl? As her sworn protector, I will show no mercy even against one of the 12 generals. If you dare harm Lady Hannah, you will fall. The butler launched a desperate assault, but Sumi-jin didn't even flinch. With a single finger, he blasted the servant backward. Sumi-jin observed the struggle with bored eyes. He had hoped the Duchess's guard might make him feel a spark of excitement. Instead, he felt only disappointment. "How tedious," Sumi-jin muttered. In an instant, flames erupted, sealing the butler's gruesome fate. Witnessing the horror, Hannah screamed the butler's name. "Klein!" She reached out in disbelief, while from the shadows, Aruto watched the tragedy unfold. Sumi-jin dismissed the carnage as archaic nonsense, admitting that even taking a life stirred zero emotion within his frozen heart. "Perhaps if the stakes were higher, I might feel something," the mage mused. He turned his cold gaze to the trembling women. "Do you understand now?" Hannah looked desperately to her mother. The older woman forced a brave smile, promising, "It will be all right. I will protect you no matter what." She crushed her daughter into a tight embrace, whispering, "I love you, my sweet Hannah." Then, stepping into the line of fire, she commanded the magician to back away. Her voice trembled with rage. "Your goal is the destruction of the Duke's noble house, isn't it?" "You are mistaken," Sumi-jin countered smoothly. "From this moment on, the Colonel family line is perfectly safe." He revealed the cruel truth. The original order was total extermination. However, the master of this house wisely chose to obey the king. Hannah's father has disowned her, in full accordance with the royal decree. Hearing the ultimate betrayal, the mother let out a soul-shattering cry. Hannah's world crumbled as she realized her own father had sold her to the executioner. Sumi-jin stated coldly, "The true Duke simply knew what was more valuable than the life of one girl." He finally understood the cruel calculus of power, a weight that tipped the scales even against his own wife's existence. At the very end, he sneered, his blade piercing her heart, declaring that sacrificing the family's future for a daughter was the height of foolishness. Hannah collapsed, trembling as she watched the life fade from her mother's eyes, while Sumi-jin gazed upon her grief and whispered, "What a magnificent expression you wear." "Perhaps she's like me, a vessel for God's paramount will. But tell me, I must know if true humanity actually exists," he mused into the silence. He loomed over Hannah, asking if she ever felt that the people of this world were merely hollow illusions, puppets dancing to the magic of a cruel god. Sumi-jin confessed with a twisted smile that he had conducted countless experiments without success, yet he hoped this trembling girl could finally answer whether she was a living soul or a mere phantom. Her tears, Hannah cried out that she was a person, but Sumi-jin's face darkened instantly. "Who gave you permission to speak? I was interrogating your soul, not your mouth." Hannah recoiled in terror, a reaction that Sumi-jin seemed to savor like a fine wine. It seemed he was on the verge of an epiphany. Suddenly, he unleashed a barrage of invisible wind swords directly at Hannah. "Perfection. This girl is the ultimate specimen." But from the shadows, Aruto burst forth, screaming for her release. Sumi-jin turned his gaze toward the intruder, his body locked in place by an overwhelming pressure. "What impeccable timing," Sumi-jin remarked coldly. "But you, boy, do not labor under the delusion that you have a right to exist here." Stepping closer, Sumi-jin's aura crushed down on Aruto as he declared, "You are unworthy of life itself. You are merely a bug interrupting my great work, and such insolence is nothing less than a plea for death." Killing intent flared in Sumi-jin's eyes, but he paused, recalling the laws regarding those unconnected to the colonels. He turned to Aruto with a new, darker proposal. A stroke of twisted genius hit him. He would conduct a new experiment, and Aruto would serve as the primary observer. He would slaughter Lady Hannah slowly, allowing the mixture of her agony and Aruto's helpless despair to reveal the true weight of human existence versus empty illusion. "A truly brilliant plan," he murmured, his arrogance swelling as he reaffirmed his own genius. Aruto silently stretched out a trembling hand, desperately trying to reach Hannah across the void. Sumi-jin noted that the boy couldn't even scream, explaining it was the absolute law of his standard of living, an immutable decree of fortune and God's will. He mocked Aruto, telling him to accept his fate. For a being born with only 2 weeks of life could do nothing but sit in silence, utterly powerless. Utterly, Aruto screamed internally, willing his body to move, begging the magician to stop, but Sumi-jin unleashed his catastrophic power, and Hannah's light was extinguished forever. Aruto could only watch as tears streamed down his face. Sumigen declared the mission a success, feigning sorrow while his heart remained as cold as ice. The next instant, he tossed the weeping Aruto aside like garbage, leaving the boy tormented by his own profound weakness and failure. Sometime later, the cold reality set in. Hannah's body was discovered beneath a watermill on the city outskirts, accompanied by a letter claiming she lacked talent and chose death to save her family's honor. But the handwriting on that note belonged to a stranger, not Hannah. Yet, the world accepted it as proof of suicide. Aruto sat by a window, the memory burning in his soul. Rewrite history with only 1 hour remaining until her death. Suddenly, a mysterious figure in a raincoat materialized on the street, and Aruto lunged at him with the ferocity of a wild beast. Sumigen demanded to know his attacker, and Aruto introduced himself simply as Aruto, a peasant with the first standard of living. The mage paused in surprise. Aruto's voice turned icy. "You are the 12th General Yufin, Sumigen Sui, are you not?" The magician replied that such knowledge would not save him from the consequences of this meeting. Aruto retorted sharply, declaring that he was not there to talk, but to put an end to this sheer stupidity. At the word stupidity, Sumigen's eyes narrowed. He stated he was merely fulfilling a royal decree. Since Aruto stood in opposition, he would have to be erased. Suddenly, the familiar paralysis seized Aruto's body. Sumigen had cast submission, locking Aruto in place. The mage struck him with his staff, roaring, "Get out of my sight! How dare a wretch like you interfere? You cannot fathom the forces you toy with." But Aruto merely stared back, realizing words were useless. Sumigen prepared to end it, urging Aruto to simply give up and die. He threw Aruto against the wall, wiping sweat from his brow, unsettled by the strange rage bubbling within him. He found it peculiar how the stubbornness of a mere child could disrupt his composure like a stone in a pond. In a flash, reality shifted. Aruto materialized directly in front of Sumigen, the dagger gripped in his hand. Sumigen had no time to react. The system window flashed. Aruto's resistance had skyrocketed, his life level ascending from 1 star to 2 stars in an instant. The magician watched the strike approach, his mind unable to process how a child with a first level of life could possibly pierce his defenses. Confusion reigned supreme. What in the world was actually unfolding? Aruto's mind flashed back to his hellish week of training. He hadn't just practiced. He had fundamentally rewritten his very stats. The biggest threat had been the enemy's crowd control magic, specifically the submission debuff. But he had calculated this perfectly. His resistance was already building up. Just as he predicted, the shackles of the spell shattered after a few hits, and a smirk tugged at Aruto's lips. Everything was dancing to his tune. To think a person's base status could be rewritten. It should have been a fantasy. Yet he had successfully hacked his own level, a feat that defied the absolute laws of this world. This, Aruto realized with burning intensity, is the true potential of my creation talent. It was as if a sleeping dragon had finally awakened, hovering high above. Sumigen looked down, his brow furrowed in confusion at this inexplicable power spike. However, the floating mage's voice dripped with arrogance as he warned Aruto that no amount of struggle would change the cruel fate awaiting him. Aruto snapped his head up, his eyes blazing with defiance as he retorted, "That isn't for you to decide." Sensing the boy's unwavering resolve, the mage let out a cold, mocking laugh. "Your arrogance, what can a bug like you hope to achieve against the might of my staff?" The attacks, Aruto felt weightless. The mana surging through his veins wasn't just a stream anymore, it was a raging ocean incomparable to before. He felt omnipotent, capable of weaving any spell imaginable. "I may be an insignificant mage to you," he roared, "but I will slaughter anyone who threatens my people." With a roar, Aruto unleashed a chaotic symphony of destruction. He fired the blazing fury of a shooting torch, the glacial prison of an icicle coffin, the violent gales of storm ascension, and the crushing pressure of a hydraulic explosion. Witnessing this elemental onslaught, the truth finally dawned on Sumigen. This boy was quadruple casting high-tier magic simultaneously. This was no longer a brawl, it was a duel of monsters. He couldn't let up for a second. Sumigen realized he had to stop playing with his food. Acknowledging Aruto's strength meant escalating this to a death match. Sumigen raised his hand, unleashing a calamitous flash of black ash aimed straight for Aruto's heart. In response, Aruto fired every single spell in his arsenal to meet the attack head-on. The collision was terrifying, but Aruto gritted his teeth, His 4 ultimate spells barely equaled one of Sumi Jin's casual attacks. The title of the kingdom's best mage wasn't just for show, but it wasn't hopeless. Aruto's eyes narrowed. The gap wasn't infinite. If this was the limit of the enemy's power, he could actually win this. He didn't hesitate. Aruto detonated compressed water spheres, instantly filling the battlefield with a blinding, dense cloud of steam. Sumi Jin scoffed, immediately seeing through the ploy, realizing the boy was trying to obscure his vision, using the thirsting for blood, but the mage moved with supernatural grace, parrying and weaving through every strike. Sumi Jin sighed, swatting the attacks away like flies, reminding him that a general of Euphonia wouldn't fall to such basic swordplay. Aruto's mind raced. How was a mage moving this fast? His opponent wasn't just a master of magic. His martial arts and agility were monstrous. He couldn't afford a single mistake. Aruto tightened grip, steeling his resolve for one decisive strike against Sumi Jin. Viewing Aruto as nothing more than a buzzing pest, Sumi Jin expanded his aura, creating a highly sensitive mana detection grid. Inside this domain, even a heartbeat would be detected. He floated there, practically inviting Aruto to step into his web, warning that one touch would mean death. He sensed a rush. He thought the boy was charging in for a suicide attack, but the sensors remained silent at the last fraction of a second. Aruto had wrath, no magic signature, no mana flow. What is he? Before Sumi Jin could finish his thought, impact, Aruto's blade slammed into him. Aruto stepped back, exhaling sharply as he declared the fight finished. But instead of screaming, Sumi Jin began to thank him, "O Lord," he muttered. A shadow fell over them. A massive street lamp was crashing down from the sky. Aruto threw himself to the side, barely escaping being crushed. The mage dusted himself off, chuckling that Aruto probably wouldn't appreciate his gratitude. His eyes narrowed dangerously. "Tell me, boy, what trick did you use? You didn't just dodge, you somehow reflected my own detection magic." "I felt nothing. That was my own spell, wasn't it?" Aruto kept a poker face, but internally he smirked. It was a system exploit he had coded specifically for this boss fight. The steam wasn't just for vision, it was to herd the mage into a confined space where the exploit would trigger. Only one move remained on the board, and none of this was luck, it was pure calculation. If a literal god had intervened, Aruto would be dead meat. But against a mere mage, he had a fighting chance. While Aruto analyzed the situation, his silence spoke volumes. The mage shrugged, deciding that if the boy wanted to keep his secrets, so be it. "By the oracle of the god Formus," the mage's voice thundered, "I am ordered to exterminate the seed of the hero before it can sprout." But for such a high-ranking mage to hunt a novice, it smelled of a conspiracy. Hearing seed of the hero, Aruto froze. How did this NPC know about his hidden talent? He couldn't let that slide. He decided to drag the truth out of the magician right there and then. Sumi Jin offered a twisted smile, praising the boy's instincts, then asked, "Have you never heard of it, the hero's talent? A divine gift appearing only once every century. History whispers a cruel truth. This divine gift always descends right before the drums of war begin to beat. Though the world hails the hero's talent as glorious, it is, in reality, a cursed omen. Its very existence sows chaos, turning the world against itself. Thus, the god of order descends to snuff out the hero's life before they are even born." Sumi Jin had placed his trust in the wrong ideals. Now, Aruto saw the absolute foolishness of his past blindness clearly. The magician turned his gaze to Aruto, arrogantly explaining the hopelessness of their situation. But Aruto cut him off with a chilling proposal. "Perhaps you have it backwards," he said, catching the magician completely off guard. Aruto asserted his truth with conviction. "It is not the hero who brings discord to the world, but the discord of the world that summons a hero." The magician scoffed, challenging Aruto to prove such heresy. Aruto admitted he lacked evidence, yet he argued that the probability of his theory being true was far greater than 0. The magician sneered, claiming he appreciated a doubting mind, but insisted, "Without a theory to back it up, you must remain silent." "It is time to end this farce," he concluded. Mana flared as he attacked Aruto, demanding to know if he would finally surrender to his fate. Aruto sensed the killing intent instantly, even at point-blank range. Sumijin observed something terrifying. Aruto showed absolutely no fear. His face was a mask, void of any pain or hesitation. Demand for death. Was it really impossible to win? So, they clashed. Aruto understood that, if the heavens intervened again, he would keep fighting until he shattered their will. Aruto moved like a phantom, weaving through the magician's barrage of attacks. As the magician locked eyes with Aruto, the atmosphere suddenly cracked. In a flash, Aruto landed a devastating punch directly on the magician's face, catching him completely unaware. Aruto followed up with a ruthless combo. His fainting down. "Is already too late for you," he declared. Sumijin could not comprehend the scene before him. Aruto was moving with a ferocity and demeanor drastically different from the boy he knew. Had he been hiding his true strength until this very moment, as Aruto pinned the magician to the earth? Sumijin felt the air itself become impossibly heavy. What was this pressure? Was it truly a gravity spell? A lost art from the forgotten age of gods? Even the kingdom's greatest magician found himself crumpled on the floor, unable to counteract this overwhelming magic. Why was the air? Aruto must have been casting a suppression spell on himself all this time, and now he was unleashing it. The magician roared in humiliation, screaming for Aruto to disappear. Such disrespect from a peasant, he would never forgive this insolence. As Aruto watched the terrifying energy concentrating into the magician's staff, he realized the weapon's true nature. Mana pulsed erratically from the artifact. Aruto, observing the instability, knew the staff could not withstand such raw power for long. No single artifact could accept such an ocean of mana. Was a heavenly crystal embedded within? The magician laughed, declaring it was too late for Aruto to realize anything. This staff is forged from the bones of dead kings in pure orichalcum. It is a masterpiece of the kingdom's technology, and its core is an artificial celestial crystal. If unleashed, it would annihilate the entire sector. He knew he would lose his title as General of Euphonia for this reckless destruction, but he no longer cared. He would reduce the one who mocked him to nothing but ash. Towering high above Aruto, levitating in the air, the magician commanded the staff to unleash the absolute power of death, destroy him ruthlessly. Taste the artifact of the mourner of the setting sun. Aruto knew instantly he could not evade this blow. Escaping the immediate blast zone was impossible. Aruto braced himself. The magician, but Aruto had played him. To think he spent almost all his mana reserves on some lowly peasant. The magician regretted not slaughtering the Colonel family long ago. He had hoped to conserve his magic because of their experienced butler, but that was a mistake. Regardless, he needed to confirm the kill, making his way through the smoking avalanches of debris. But then, his heart stopped. Aruto was standing there, amidst the ruins. The magician could not comprehend how this was possible. Why was he still alive? Aruto gazed at his own trembling hands. The magician was bleeding, but Aruto realized how close he had been to death the moment the magic was released. Aruto had activated his prepared cheat skill. He withstood the blow for a split second, simultaneously activating the grave skill to burrow into a deep crack he created. Aruto avoided a direct hit, but the shockwave itself was powerful enough to rattle his bones. If that technique had struck him while he was at full magical exposure, he would have definitely died. From the dust, the Aruto silenced him, smashing a stone directly into the mage's head. Aruto struggled to keep his footing, but he knew he had won. Compared to the agony of losing Hana, the magician's attacks felt like nothing. Approaching the fallen mage, Aruto looked down with cold eyes. You are to protect the... He would defy fate and crush this enemy head on. The impact flung the magician away, leaving him lying unconscious directly at Aruto's feet, the blade over the magician's throat. He knew he had to finish this now. Otherwise, Hana would be in danger once again. This was his only chance. His earlier attack had proven effective, and mercy was a luxury he could not afford. He knew the same trick wouldn't work twice. He had it right here, right now, but his hand froze. Just then, a shadow fell from above. Lion had arrived. "Master, what is going on?" Lion shouted, landing heavily and confused by the chaos. Aruto instantly recognized his chaotic subordinate. Lion rushed forward to check on him, but his clumsy... He tripped and face-planted hard, with a heavy sheathed his blade. While binding the unconscious mage, Lion felt the heavy atmosphere. Still, he flashed a grin to reassure his master that the danger had passed. "The vile Sumijin is secured," Lion announced proudly, "though, technically I didn't defeat him alone." Aruto corrected quietly. It wasn't a true victory. Don't sell yourself short. Besides, taking a life, that isn't something to be taken lightly, see, Lion murmured, his voice turning serious. Aruto knew he was right. Even now, the adrenaline faded, leaving his hands trembling uncontrollably. He simply couldn't deliver that final strike. Lion stepped closer, his presence comforting like a mountain. Master, it is only natural to hesitate before taking a human life. Slaying demons is one thing, but this... Lion shook his head. Sumijin caused immense destruction, but the government will deal with him now. Relief washed over the big warrior, seeing his master safe. Aruto, seeing Lion's genuine concern, finally managed a weak smile. Lion hoisted Aruto to his feet, eyes wide with awe. I still can't believe it. Wow. You took down one of Euphonia's 12 generals. You really are a true master. No, you're wrong. Aruto shook his head. I only won because luck was on my side. Sumijin wasn't prepared for me. I caught him off guard. I forced the fight into the only scenario where I had the advantage. It was a gamble. If the circumstances had been even slightly different, I would be dead right now, or wishing I was. But Aruto knew the real truth. It was his stats. The massive increase in his levels was the only reason he survived this encounter. If his level had been even 1 point lower, if he hadn't allocated his points perfectly, he would have certainly perished. Lion noticed Aruto's distant gaze and pale face. Master, you look terrible. Can you even move? I'm fine. Just thinking, Aruto replied, shaking off the dizziness. Wait, wasn't Majika supposed to be with you? She wasn't there, Lion explained. She checked out of the hotel way before I did. Aruto frowned. Where did she go? Nobody knows. It was her choice. Lion shrugged. Aruto sighed, trying to convince himself. She's strong. She'll be fine. Suddenly, ran down Aruto's spine. He violently shoved Lion away, sensing a terrifying presence cutting through the air. Aruto staggered. He hadn't recovered yet, but standing before them was a familiar nightmare. My, she smirked. It has been a long time. Lion scrambled for balance, staring at the intruder. Master? Who is this girl? The girl looked offended. You don't remember me. I am Citri Justice, one of Euphonia's 12 generals, an official of the Council of True and False. So, she glared daggers at them. I helped you with the dragon's reward. Did that fight knock the memories out of your skull? Lion squinted at her. He focused less on her titles and more on her bizarre, spiral hair. She definitely looks like a villain, he muttered. Citri scoffed, stepping closer. You commoners have no taste. You can't appreciate true beauty. Aruto rolled his eyes. I think you're the only one who appreciates that hairstyle. The playful atmosphere vanished. Citri's expression darkened. Enough of this idle chatter. My patience has run out. I won't waste my breath on a simpleton. She sneered. She pointed a finger straight at Aruto's heart. I am here for you, Aruto. You have been designated as evil. Her words hit Aruto like a physical blow. What? Lion stepped in, furious. That's nonsense. Aruto saved this city. Sumijin was the one who destroyed everything. My master is a hero. I am aware of the politics, Citri replied coldly. Sumijin has been stripped of his rank, but I do not care about human laws. Her eyes glowed with fanaticism. My mission comes from a higher power. I exist to eliminate those judged as evil by the system god. In the name of the Council of True and False, I hereby condemn you for your sins. She moved faster than sight. Aruto, still exhausted on the ground, could only watch as death rushed toward him. Clang. Steel met steel. Lion had stepped in, his massive frame shielding Aruto from the strike. Is this your justice? Lion roared, muscles bulging. Murdering innocents, I won't let you lay a finger on my master. Citri jumped back, eyeing Lion with new interest. Oh, I thought you were just a brainless meat shield, but your technique, it's passable. Lion grinned confidently. And you think you can hurt me with that toothpick of a sword? Stand back. Master, I'll handle this little girl. Lion, wait. Aruto's voice trembled with panic from behind. Don't underestimate her. Her weapon. It's not normal. Trust me, Master. Lion ignored the warning and charged. Come here, you curly-haired witch. No, stop! Aruto screamed. Late. Citri's blade flashed like a streak of lightning. You are out of your league. Citri whispered. The blade didn't just strike. It phased right through Lion's defenses. Lion paused. He was a tank. His maximum damage resistance skill made him invincible to physical attacks. He shouldn't have felt a thing. But then, reality shattered. Agony exploded in his arm. Blood sprayed into the air as Lion stared in horror. His invincibility had been broken. Aruto scrambled to his feet. Screaming Lion's name, he rushed to the tank's side, panic rising in his voice. "Are you okay?" It made no sense. Lion's pain resistance was legendary, practically absolute. How could he be bleeding? Aruto's gaze snapped to Citri. Beneath that delicate appearance, she had just triggered a terrifying hidden ability. Aruto realized the truth. That sword wasn't just steel, it was a divine artifact embodying absolute justice. And it answered only to Citri. On paper, her stats were far lower than Simigan or the other 12 generals. Even Lion surpassed her in raw destructive power. Lion gasped, staring at his wound in disbelief. Aruto gritted his teeth. And that is exactly why we cannot win. The weapon carried a cruel curse. It punished any opponent stronger than its wielder. She was outclassed, so she baited Lion's attack the moment he's shattering his body. Aruto shouted a warning. You cannot neutralize her with a single blow. Touch a single hair on her head, and the damage reflects instantly. If we strike too hard, we pay with our own lives. It was a cruel paradox. The stronger Aruto became, the more impossible victory would be. This broken logic was how Citri's justice dominated the 12 generals, and Euphonia Lion roared in frustration. That is completely unfair. Then how do we kill her? Lion demanded. Citri narrowed her eyes, realizing Aruto knew far too many of her secrets. Her mind raced. Did I use this weapon on him before? She stepped forward, her aura menacing. Where did you acquire such information? Did we fight in a past life? Aruto scoffed, waving it off as a bad joke. If you are just stalling to recover your stamina, forget it. Suddenly, boom! A massive explosion shook the earth. Aruto spun around. The blast came from Cornello's estate. His mind raced. Was Simigan back, or was there another enemy lurking in the shadows? We have to move, now, Aruto yelled at Lion. A blinding light pierced the sky, and Aruto sensed an energy far more terrifying than Simigan's. Hannah was in danger. They sprinted away, but Citri was hot on their heels, mocking them. Running away in your condition, pathetic. Even Citri paused, distracted by the chaos. What was that noise? Is fortune favoring me today? She watched Aruto hesitate, his soul seemingly weighed down by guilt before the gods. He's trying to flee, she realized. She raised her blade, ready to end his miserable life right there. Aruto's thoughts spiraled into despair. He had failed to finish Simigan, and now he couldn't even save Hannah. But then, a miracle. Rue, the slime, jumped between them. Aruto never expected the little creature to fight back. Aruto caught the slime, stunned. Was this a joke? But the substance began dissolving in his hands. Panic gripped his heart. Rue, answer me. Don't you dare die. Countless memories of their journey flashed before his eyes. But it was too late. All that remained in his hands was a split, lifeless core. Pure, unadulterated rage exploded. Aruto drew for killing Rue, but suddenly, darkness swallowed him. He opened his eyes in the familiar void. A figure loomed on the throne. Still oblivious to the curse, I see it has been a while. This was the entity, the Master of Fate, who had sent Aruto through 2 lifetimes. The being sighed, unimpressed. Losing control in a fit of rage, did you not understand the artifact's true horror? Aruto recognized this cold abyss. It was the waiting room of the dead. He had failed again. A chair materialized from nothing. Sit down, the entity commanded. We have a chance to speak. Aruto trembled. Am I dead? Not quite. The voice echoed. Your soul has simply hit its limit. You can be reborn, though your current vessel will be discarded. Your soul remains intact, just like the last life, but this time you have chosen a much harsher path. The grief over Rue had nearly shattered Aruto's spirit completely. I am already dead, Aruto screamed. Send me back immediately. The entity leaned forward. Before I do, answer one question. What will you do if you return to that world? Aruto's eyes burned with hatred. I will slaughter Citri the second I land. I will exact vengeance for Rue. A dimensional rift cracked open beneath his feet. Then you cannot go back, the entity stated coldly. Aruto froze. Why, she killed my most loyal partner. Have you forgotten your true purpose? The creature asked. Remember the request you made when you first arrived? The words unlocked a memory. Aruto saw a vision, smiling hand reaching out. The creature nodded as Aruto's memory stirred. Our goals are aligned. I cannot let your soul be destroyed by vengeance before you fulfill your destiny. The entity's voice echoed in the void, demanding composure before piercing him with the ultimate question, what will you seek upon your return to the mortal realm? A hellfire of rage burned within Aruto. He craved vengeance for Rue, but he knew the cost. Surrendering to bloodlust would only mean burying more of those he cherished. He had rewound the clock for one singular, divine purpose, to save Hana from her tragic fate. As Aruto declared his resolve, the creature acknowledged the weight of his gamble. He was wagering his very soul to protect his precious person. And so, the path opened, casting Aruto back into the fray, destined for nothing less than absolute victory. Aruto roared his defiance. The wager was back on. There would be no restarts, no second chances, not until his spirit was ground to dust. The blade froze mere millimeters from Citri's throat. Her eyes widened, trembling as she branded him a sinner and pleaded for mercy. Aruto's mind raced. Analyzing his weapon, his blade possessed a unique attribute. It became devastatingly powerful when facing the mighty. However, there was a dark side. A cursed technique existed to butcher the weak, but the backlash would devour the wielder in return. He analyzed his opponent. After her brutal clash with Rue, Citri was already broken, battered, and barely standing. His gaze turned cold as steel. I have no time. Stunned by his overwhelming arrogance, he barked an order to Lion, take Rue and get to safety now. But Lion hesitated, desperate to stand by his master's side in the coming storm. Aruto turned, his expression softening just enough. He refused to let Rue suffer another second of pain in this timeline. We reunite once Hana is safe, he vowed. Until that moment, he bore the burden of their lives solely on his shoulders. Lion clenched his fists, issuing a counter-demand. Then you must save her, protect Hana, and come back alive. Aruto flashed a confident smile, sealing the promise. As he vanished, Lion turned his glare toward Citri. You poor fool. You should have run while you had the chance. Citri blinked, clueless to her fate. Lion shook his head in pity. For one of the 12 generals, your ignorance is truly pathetic. He scoffed at the sky. If this is the best you have, this kingdom is already crumbling into ruin. Suddenly, the heavens tore open. Entities descended like falling stars. Elsewhere, Majika sprinted. Her heart of mana washed over her. This pressure. She assumed he was locked in mortal combat with the monster, Sumi Jin. She had to assist him, but suddenly, a suffocating aura descended upon the colonel's estate, freezing the air itself. Is this the wrath of the god Foramus? Just today, the divine seed, the germ of God, had manifested within Hana. Majika grit her teeth. The heavens were moving too fast, targeting the hero's embryo before it could even mature. She had miscalculated the danger. A beam of light slammed down from the clouds, obliterating the mansion in a catastrophic explosion. The shadows of God had arrived. Majika witnessing a massacre as the divine assassin slaughtered everyone in sight. Hana's parents, the staff, butchered instantly. I won't let you touch her. Majika unleashed her fury, engaging the shadows to protect the divine vessel. A blood-curdling scream pierced the chaos. It was Hana, trapped on the top floor. An army of shadows blocked her way. Out of my way, lines like a hurricane of steel. She burst into the room just as a shadow raised its blade, hurling a... Hana, hold on. Majika deflected the... Forgive me. I was too late, but I swear, everything will be all right now. As Hana wept, let them try. I will not let a single filthy hand touch you ever again. Aruto crashed onto the scene, his heart sinking into the abyss. It looked exactly like the past. Had defeating Sumi Jin changed nothing? Was fate absolute? Despair clawed at his throat. If history repeats, then Hana is already a corpse. Aruto. Majika's voice cut through the smoke. There, behind her, Hana stood unharmed. A wave of relief nearly brought Aruto to his knees. Are you hurt? He cried out. Majika silenced him sharply. Save the questions. We have a bigger problem. Look up. The shadows of God were just the vanguard, she warned. Something far more terrifying is descending from the heavens. Time had run out. Aruto looked up and froze as a majestic, terrifying entity breached the clouds. A demon? No. Aruto's eyes widened in sheer disbelief. The being standing before him defied all logic. The sinister aura of a demon was there, but amplified 1,000-fold. It was a pressure that crushed the very air around them. Unlike the monsters spawned from darkness, this was different. This was an entity sculpted holy paradox, a good demon. Aruto didn't hesitate. He instantly dismantled the magical hacking code he used against Sumi-jin, neutralizing the interference to unleash his full potential. Adapting to the anomaly, power surged through his veins. He could move. He could fight. Hana, don't move a muscle. Aruto unsheathed his blade, his killing intent spiking. In a flash, the good demon lunged. The speed was God strike, steel clashing against divine might, but then pieces. The dragon's fang dagger was tougher than nitrile, yet it shattered upon impact. How is this even possible? Suddenly, Aruto gasped. You saved me. Stay sharp, she warned. Even Majika was struggling to track their foe's movements. The artifact the enemy wielded clearly marked her as a heavy warrior class, yet her agility rivaled Majika's own godlike speed. Was this a trait of the squirrel tribe? No, she was a monstrosity, a creation born of God. Sensing the crushing gravity of the situation, Aruto realized there was only one way to survive. They had to split the aggro. Majika, take the vanguard, I'll cover the rear, he commanded. Majika nodded, instantly understanding the strategy, and launched herself into the fray. Only Majika, whose velocity could match their opponent, could hope to engage her head-on. As the two warriors clashed, Aruto seized the opening. He activated Microflash to lock onto the demon. Perfectly synchronized with Aruto's move, Majika pressed her attack, forcing the enemy into a corner. Aruto manipulated the beams of light to weave around Majika's dodges. Find blind spot. He delivered a precision strike directly to the demon's back. The hit registered, the damage was minor, but the attack was undeniably effective. But suddenly, the girl's wings erupted with a blinding intensity, leaving Aruto completely bewildered. In the next heartbeat, a storm of feathers unleashed from her wings, Aruto realized with horror the sheer volume made evasion impossible. The razor-sharp feathers closed in from every direction. He tried to activate his hacking skill, but at that critical moment, the system failed to respond. A single feather pierced his chest. The massive force launched Aruto backward, smashing him through the walls of a nearby building. Majika screamed, her voice filled with terror, but Aruto lay motionless on the ground, silent and unresponsive.